I was 13 years old when I stopped trick-or-treating. The other kids weren't so eager to give up free candy, but something happened that year. Something awful. My friends Owen, Drew, and I were out trekking for candy when we came to a house that had a big bowl of it sitting on the porch. A sign above it read, "Please take just one." We joked about swiping it all, but Owen and Drew only took a few each, enough to make them feel like badasses. I'd always been afraid to take more than one because I was intimidated by authority. I mean, sure, it was just a sign, and it usually meant that the owner wasn't home, but I was a timid kid who always did what he was told. Owen and Drew explained how that house did the same thing every year and that people rarely saw the guy who lived there. They dared me to do what they were too chicken to, so I decided to see what it was like to do something naughty. We'd looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I poured the contents of the bowl into my bag. The three of us ran down the street laughing and shoving each other. Part of me expected someone to chase after us. In hindsight, I was right to be concerned. At Owen's house, we dumped out and sorted all our yummy treasures. I tried to offer him and Drew some of the contraband candy, but they refused. Granted, they weren't entirely serious, but I was annoyed that they weren't sharing in the responsibility, enough to go home instead of sleeping over. That night, I was torn from a sugar-fueled dream by a hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. The skin was rough and the blade was ice cold. It was just slightly pressing into my skin, ready to slit my throat in a moment's notice. My body went stiff. I wanted to scream, but then a gruff voice whispered, "Don't make a fucking sound." At first, I didn't realize what was happening. Were we being burglarized? Then I got my answer. "Can't you read, you little shit? The sign said just one. Just fucking one." I'll never forget those words, and the sickening smell of his breath. He went on to explain how every year he would catch kids taking 2 or 3 pieces of candy, which always infuriated him. It wasn't until I took the entire bowl that he finally snapped. Why did I do something so stupid? I was terrified and humiliated at the same time. "You like candy, you little shit?" he asked me, so I shook my head as much as I could despite his hand pressing against my face. He then removed it, still holding the knife to my neck, and proceeded to shove unwrapped candy into my mouth. I tried not to inhale, but I couldn't help it. I could feel things pushing against the back of my throat as I whimpered and drooled. I started to gag, but he put his hand back over my mouth so I wouldn't cough anything up. I truly believed I was going to die, and I feared for my friends as well. My short life flashed quickly before my eyes, and all I could think in that moment was, how could an adult hate children this much? Everything I presumed about them was suddenly a lie. They weren't infallible, and their authority wasn't always law. Fine, so I took this guy as candy. Did I really deserve to die? As I contemplated this for the first time, expecting to suffocate to death, my father rushed into the room, grabbed my metal desk chair, and beat the living daylights out of the guy. I never loved my dad so much as I did that night. I'm an adult now, and I live alone in a nice house on a quiet street with lots of kids. Every Halloween, I leave a basket on my front porch full of candy with a sign that reads, "Take as many as you want."
You might have already heard of the TV broadcast hijacking in Seneca, North Carolina. The story's gained pretty wide currency on the internet, and part of the broadcast is even available on YouTube, assuming that it hasn't been taken down for whatever reason. For the uninitiated, the Seneca hijacking is one of the lesser-known broadcast signal intrusions. It was big news here, but the nation news and the media barely covered it. Anyway, I've decided to jot down my impressions of the whole thing, even though other eyewitnesses have described it far more eloquently than I ever could. I was home on winter break when it happened, making chemistry flashcards in front of the TV, and no one else was around. After watching the 1000th Law & Order rerun, I got bored and started channel surfing. A couple minutes later, I stumbled onto this shitty public access channel where, bizarrely enough, My old high school Latin teacher was reciting a poem while wearing this dorky three-cornered hat. I watched for a few minutes and had a pretty good laugh. I remembered him as being a pretty serious guy, not the kind of person who'd embarrass himself in public like this. When suddenly there was this staticky crackle, and the screen cut to this multicolored test pattern. Before I had time to change the channel, there's another crackle, and this weird cartoon shows up on screen. The animation style was very detailed, but kind of jiggly and rough. It reminded me of some of those old anti-drug PSAs. Anyway, it seemed, normal enough at first. An ordinary-looking middle-class family eating breakfast together at a round kitchen table. There was a mom in an old-fashioned hairdo, a dad and two cherub-faced kids, a boy and a girl, all very Norman Rockwell. The family is making some banal small talk. The dad complains about his day at the office, and the kids prattle on about soccer practice, and so on. Gradually, though, the scene started to get slightly sinister. A green light is seeping through the open window, and the family starts to acquire a jaundiced, unhealthy look. Their skin changes color, and their eyes become sunken. In the background, a droning radio broadcast slowly becomes perceptible. The announcer gives the date is November 15th, 2017, and then starts to go on about some strange crisis, but you can barely hear what he's saying. He says something about a green light, melting flesh, mutations, and strange shapes emerging from the sea. Again and again, the phrase, "report to the nearest shelter immediately," is audible. Still, the family keeps eating breakfast as if nothing is happening. And here's where it gets really macabre. The family finishes eating breakfast, and Mom loads the kids into a minivan. By now they look really unhealthy. Their bodies are skeletally thin, and the whites of their eyes are a sickly, yellowish color, and their hair is disheveled. The car drives through a landscape bathed in the green glow from before. Strange shapes bob in and out of the screen, but you can't quite tell what they are, and all of the buildings the car passes look weathered and deserted. Finally, the car stops at a playground, and the mom drops off the kids before driving away. There are large, oddly colored rocks all over the ground, and moaning can be heard in the distance. The kids hang mirthlessly on the monkey bars for a while. Eventually, the camera pans over the playground, and you see that the rocks littering the ground aren't rocks at all, but naked human forms, horribly disfigured. They seem to be either growing into or from the ground. I could never say which. And they are very much alive. Behind these monkey bars, a tree can be seen with a human face growing from the trunk. Its features are writhing and contorted in agony. The scene suddenly shifts to a white-collar office where the children's father is stooped over a desktop, typing away. His features are as sunken and diseased as that of the other family members, and the office is covered in a green glow. In the other cubicles, fleshless corpses sit upright at their desks, frozen in death. Finally, we see the family return home for the evening, walking through the front door together. Their skin is no longer simply jaundiced, but actually melting off, dripping from their outstretched arms and running down their faces in drops. As they're literally falling to pieces, the family sits down in the dining room and begins to wordlessly eat dinner. Their flesh becomes more and more amorphous, ribbons of skin dangling from their bodies like the tendrils of an octopus. I could barely describe it, but they somehow begin to merge with the chairs they're seated on, or rather their skin grows over them. By now, their skin has become the consistency of melted ice cream, and they're barely recognizable as human, except for their eyes, which somehow remained intact. The camera zooms closer and closer to the table, and finally their eyes all move directly towards the camera, conveying a feeling of unfathomable sadness. The screen goes black and large white letters appear. Report to the nearest shelter immediately. Remaining at private residences is strictly prohibited. And with that, the screen turned to static. I stared in stunned silence for a few minutes before the banal local channel switched back on. And that's all I know, really. I almost thought I was dreaming until the paper reported the story the next day. God knows what really happened. Was it a ridiculously elaborate prank? Or some ill-advised viral marketing campaign? Who knows? The crazier parts of the internet certainly have their own theories.
About a year ago, I frequented one of those sites where people post a variety of funny pictures, videos, and all kinds of stupid internet memes. I didn't do much after school besides sitting on my computer, wasting time back then. Sometimes I would browse the newest upload section of the site, looking for pictures that might give me a quick laugh or smile. My internet connection was slow and laggy, so I always skipped over posts of videos, being too impatient to wait for any of them to buffer, just to see some 30-second clip of a guy getting hit in the crotch or whatever. But there was this one time I made an exception. I spotted a video titled Radio Host Prank Called, which quickly captured my interest. I figured something like that was worth waiting a minute or so to watch. The video clip turned out to be audio only, with a black screen for the entire duration. I probably should have expected that, considering the post title did say it was a radio host. The man in the video who was being prank called ran an internet radio show called The Real Eagle, where he apparently spent a few hours twice a week ranting about how white people were the only real Americans and other racist bullshit like that. The guy sounded kind of old, maybe in his 40s or 50s, and talked in a low, sort of grumbling tone. He also went by the alias Dusty. Not surprising that he wouldn't use his real name. But what was mainly important here was that during the last 20 minutes of every show, he would do a segment where he started accepting phone calls from the audience. Needless to say, it was hilarious. Every single call the guy received was a joke, and let me tell you, it made the guy pissed. Sure, the jokes the callers pulled on him were pretty lame, but it was Dusty's reaction that made it so entertaining. At one point towards the end of the show, you could hear him throw something at the wall and curse far away from the mic as if he were about to leave the room in his anger. After I'd seen that video, I started visiting Dusty's webpage as a radio blogging site to listen to the show live. Even without the barrage of prank calls, it was funny enough just to listen to the idiotic rants on their own. He would say crap like, "We need to purge the blacks and Mexicans from our soil," almost on a daily basis. The site had a chat room box on the side where everyone that visited mocked the hell out of him during every broadcast. Dusty never paid any attention to it though. The site he hosted the show off of had a chat box for every individual broadcast by default, so I guess he either never noticed or just didn't care. I spent the next few months listening to Dusty whenever he was on. Every Monday and Friday, from 8 PM to 11 PM, he was on air spouting the same nonsense with a little rewording. Despite all the prank calls he received, he would always still proceed with the phone call segments at the end of every show. You would think by then he would have learned his lesson and call it quits. But he never did. Similarly, you could say the same thing about me. Nothing really changed over the months that I listened to Dusty. And I wasn't even one of the people that consistently prank calls him every show. To me, listening to The Real Eagle was just another way to kill my boredom. Sure, the show was funny, but it never really caught on or grossed a huge following. At most, there were maybe 150 people that had tuned into the show live at once. And I can almost guarantee that every single one of them were there just to mock and laugh at him. For these reasons, what happened during one particular episode took me completely by surprise. It was the start of the last 20 minutes of the show. Everything up to that point was ordinary. My parents were out, so I had been parked on my living room couch with my laptop and headphones listening to the pathetic rantings of Dusty, now awaiting the almost routine barrage of prank calls from his fans. This is where things had begun to get odd. Rather than starting the last segment like he usually would, Dusty instead had gotten strangely silent and then got up, leaving the room without a word. Several minutes had passed without a sound. Everyone in the chat room was going berserk, clearly pissed off that they weren't getting the chance to harass their favourite bigot. Some had even started leaving, most likely thinking that Dusty had simply had enough of their crap and just left them to sit there like idiots for the rest of the show. I was about to give up and leave the stream myself until the distinct noise of a door opening sounded through over the broadcast. Curious to see what Dusty had come back for, I stopped myself from closing the window and listened. As I heard Dusty re-enter the room, there were the muffled sounds of him shouting stuff along the lines of "Get in there!" in a few different variations, followed by the muted sounds of someone sobbing. I was now even more curious. Dusty had never once brought another person in the show before. Every other broadcast, it had only ever been him alone during the show. But besides the obvious questions of who this new person was and why they were there, what concerned me more was why they were crying, and why was Dusty shouting at them in such a threatening voice. All of this had caught me off guard, and I was starting to feel a sinking feeling brewing in my gut. The soft crying noises grew louder as Dusty and the second person approached the still turned on microphone. Now closer, the crying from the other person was clearer now. The sound quality of the microphone Dusty used for his show was far from great, and you could only hear him clearly when he talked directly into the microphone, but I could still tell this person was a woman. Between her cries, I could hear her softly pleading. "Please," she begged. "Stop it." I wasn't sure at first, due to the scratchy audio, but it sounded like the woman had an accent of some kind. I couldn't tell you which, but I think you can understand why that would be relevant to mention.
"In this beautiful land we live in, filthy bastards like these wander in and taint the progress of the true Americans."
His words were nothing different from anything else I've heard him say in previous shows, but hearing him say them in the current circumstances carried a sense of dread with it. It was more than a little unsettling at this point, and I was greatly reconsidering the option of leaving the broadcast. The chat box, which was usually flooding with heckling at the show's host, had noticeably decreased in activity. I imagined that everyone was most likely focusing directly on what was happening on the show right now. Dusty continued on, speaking more nonsense about a pure race and how he would cleanse the US of all who dared to taint it. I can't fully recall everything he had said at that point, as I was more focused on the sounds of the woman's crying. This went on for a few moments, with me listening attentively, hoping that everything was going to be okay, and that this woman was not actually in any kind of danger. Suddenly, Dusty's rant came to an abrupt stop and was immediately followed up by a loud, clicking noise. The woman began screaming. In reaction, her yell was gaining an echo as she ran away from wherever the microphone was placed. Her pleading words from earlier were now intensified and desperate, now loud enough to be picked up by the mic at a distance.
"Please don't do this. Just stop."
That was when it hit me. I couldn't tell at first due to the previously mentioned audio quality issues, but that clicking noise must have been the cocking of a gun. Dusty was going to shoot this woman. My mind did not fully accept the belief that this woman was in serious danger, but there was no way to deny it now. This couldn't have been a prank. The woman's cries for help sounded too real. I was now convinced that Dusty had forced this woman into the location of wherever it was that he hosted the show from and planned to shoot her. I had completely frozen up. What the hell was I supposed to do? It wasn't as if I could pick up the phone and call the cops. This was a radio show on the internet. There was no way they'd be able to do anything, at least not immediately anyway. Panic began to overwhelm me as I struggled to think of anything I could do. The woman's begging had suddenly grown louder. It was hard to hear over her shouting, but Dusty also began to say something. The way his voice was muffled indicated he had his back to the mic.
You've ruined our land. You're the disease, and I am the cure.
Unable to do anything else, the woman once again pleaded with her attacker.
You don't have to do this.
The woman shouted.
I won't tell anyone. Please, just let me.
All of the noise ceased, and the only sound I could hear was the rapid beating of my heart. The loud bang had sent a jolt through my body. Once again, I was frozen in place, not knowing what to do. And then my brain finally finished processing everything I had just heard. Dusty had just killed that woman. Upon this realization, my mind began to panic, and I started to try and convince myself that this was all just a dream or an elaborate hoax. All the while, hearing nothing but the static buzzing of the broadcast through my headphones, with no sound coming from the gunman. I shook my head, desperately trying to remove the gruesome image of the woman's dead body from my mind. Several more minutes of silence passed. I don't know why I didn't just close the browser. I just sat there listening, unable to do anything else. I don't know how long this continued for, but eventually, some of my sense began to return to me, and I moved my mouse towards the red X in the top right-hand corner of the screen. But then, something stopped me. In a tone that sounded as if he were grinning, Dusty spoke into the microphone one last time.
They snuck into our country by the waves of the ocean. I'll make sure they go back the same way, one piece at a time.
I clicked and closed the browser.
So get this, 4 days ago people in my life started to be replaced. Well, I say 4. I mean, it could have begun at any time in recent history, but I only really wised to it last week. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. I've got a story to tell, and none of us seem to be going anywhere for a little while, so we might as well make the best of it, right? So, I'm at an inter-school football match, and there's like a minute left on the clock, and the ball comes my way. I've never really been into sports. I only joined the team so the jocks wouldn't lay into me like they did everyone else. And while I'm not a bad player, I've never scored an official match before. So I see this as my opportunity to silence the post-game taunting in the locker room. I make a dive, but misjudge the distance and go down hard as a whole host of other players go for the ball. In the confusion, somebody's foot smashes down into my temple. Everything is red flashes and black holes, and for the briefest moment I catch a glimpse of a silhouette in some kind of jester's hat, hanging upside down in my field of view and silently laughing at me. So I blink, and suddenly my pal Pete Greenway is kneeling beside me, reaching for me. I reach up to him, and he grabs my wrist to pull me to my feet, and he says, "Took quite the knock there, bud." This is when it gets kind of hard to explain. My head feels about 1,000 times its usual size, and everything is swimming in my vision, and somehow I just know that this isn't Pete Greenway. Like, since when did Pete Greenway ever call me Bud? Since when did Pete Greenway have a tiny pale scar on his chin? Details, man. Details. I'm stuck by this sense of unfamiliarity. The closer he gets, the more his stupid fucking smile looms in my face, and the less close I feel to this guy who had 2 weeks previously spent the weekend drinking with me in my dad's old cabin to celebrate my 19th. I mean, this replacement is good. When he speaks, I'd swear that I was hearing my friend, but there is something so unnervingly familiar about him. So I pull away from not Pete Greenway and scramble to my feet. There's blood in my mouth and more trickling down the side of my face, and someone steers me over to the stand while the others play on. All the while, this actor, this stranger, is watching me with a weird, dismayed look on his face, as though I'd shattered some plan he had. I'm suddenly aware that everyone in the stand seems to be looking at me. Like, when I'd look at them, they'd be laughing and cheering the game, but in the corner of my blood-muddied vision, I swear that all the eyes were on me. Now, I've always hated people staring at me, so I hurry off the field and back to the showers, which are deserted, as the game's still going on. Once I've cleaned up, I drive back to my dad's place, head full of images of crimson supernovas. The old man isn't home, so I park in the driveway and lie in the bed with the lights off for a few hours. But it doesn't do me any good because in the shadows above me, silhouetted in a different gray to the rest of the darkness that covers my bedroom, the jester hangs, his shoulders heaving in that awful, silent laugh. I turn the lights back on, but the only things that hang from my ceiling are cobwebs. The phone rings and it's Pete. I'm absolutely sure he's not the actor because his voice is so real. Unlike that waxy automaton on the playing field, hearing him speak fires off memories of my old friend in my head, and I can't help but feel a relieved smile play over my lips. He sounds over the fucking moon, and more than a little drunk. In fact, he's slurring his words so I don't get everything. Apparently there's a party going on in his place to celebrate the results of the game, and others are worried about me. Katie Gilbert is going to be there, he says in that mocking way friends do when they know you're crushing on someone. Classic Pete, man. Anyways, apparently she's asking after me. I say I'll be over and put the phone down. My head starts to hurt again, but I swallow more painkillers and throw on a fresh shirt. I don't want to look like a slob in front of Katie. As I near the door, the pain in my head returns. My vision begins to blur into red starbursts, and that spectral abomination is chuckling away, silently, in the corner of my eye. Beneath the blind panic and pain, I feel a sickening urge of fear. Fear at the jester. Fear at what may lie beyond my own front door. I reel backwards and the pain recedes. The thing in the corner of my vision becomes my own shadow, falling across the cupboard door where my old man keeps his fishing gear. I pause to catch my breath and reassure myself that it's probably just a concussion, but even as I do so, I'm reaching for the cupboard's door handle, turning it and pulling that light cord. Inside, atop a Tupperware box of spare hooks, I find his hunting knife, buckled into a faded sheath. When I take it, the niggling fear and the throbbing pain at the back of my skull dim. Safety in a sharp blade. I tuck it into the back of my pants and pull down my shirt to cover it. The party is in full swing by the time I get there. It's dark. All strobe lights and the cheapest shit smoke machine Pete bought at the dollar store are on, and it smells like burnt plastic. All eyes are on me when I enter. Not that I can see them too well, of course, but I know it. I can feel it, you know? Eyes on me as I turn my back to the guests. I pretend to ignore it and grab a beer from the kitchen. There's no sign of Pete, and though I'm feeling reassured that what happened on the playing field was a one-off, reassured at being armed, so I stay in the kitchen and press the cold bottle against my wound on my temple. I feel beads of moisture trickle down the glass, but as I turn back to the door, Katie Gilbert bursts in, all red lipstick and low-cut top. "Dave," she yells, "you came. I was waiting for ages." She grabs me by the hand and drags me out of the kitchen towards the stairs. Not that I mind too much, of course. I mean, this is Katie fucking Gilbert we're talking about here. You remember her, right? Like the single hottest girl in our year? Now, she's drunk as shit and pulling me towards the spare room. I'm not complaining. So she's blabbering away and sipping from my beer, and her giggling friends are looking on from the door to the lounge. Then we're in the bedroom, and she's kissing me hard, and I taste the alcohol from her tongue. When she pulls away, she runs her fingers through my hair, then rests them against the wound on my temple, gazing at it with what I think was supposed to be an empathetic expression. "Oh, Dave," she says. She probes at it experimentally, and pain shoots through my head like a camera flash. I see the jester reflected in the dark glass of the window, and I suddenly begin to sweat. I stagger back a bit from her, but she grabs me by my shoulders. She starts to ask questions about how I'm feeling, but I'm not listening. I'm inspecting her face, the proportioning of it, the gentle slope of her freckled nose, and the way her hair frames it so perfectly. Too perfectly. "Where's Katie?" I ask. "I'm right here," she laughs. "What are you talking about?" My fingers curl about the handle of the knife. The jester stops laughing. It's easier than it might seem to flee a party covered in blood. Everyone is drunk and nobody will remember shit the next day. The hard part is actually cleaning oneself up. I showered twice and put on the clothes I was wearing. Fuck you. I showered twice and burned the clothes I was wearing and put on my hunting gear. The padlock on my dad's bedroom closet was a polymer piece of garbage from Walmart, so I lever it off with the knife. The shotgun is exactly where I remember it being. In fact, I don't think it's moved since Pete and I took it to shoot cans in the quarry outside of town that one time in spring. I grab it and stuff my pockets with shells. My head wounds start to bleed again. The jester flickers in and out of the corner of my vision, but every time I swing around to face him, he's gone. Then there's a click, and the light comes on. "David?" says my old man. I turn around, a half-formed explanation dying on my lips as I look into the eyes of a man that is most certainly not my father. My jaw works, as though I'm trying to chew a particularly rubbery object, and tears sting in my eyes. Pete and Katie were important to me, sure, but now I'm looking into the eyes of a man desperately trying to imitate the only family I've ever had. A seasoned actor, no doubt, but not my father. The old man steps forward, wiping the oil from his fingers on his already grimy overalls. His face, lined and cracked like old leather, is pinched with some sort of emotion. Concern? Fear? "David," he says again. He reaches for the gun in my hands. "Where is he?" I snap. What? "Why are you doing this? What have you done to him?" "Son," he says. I shoot him once in the chest. He stumbles away from the cupboard, sending the bare bulb above my head in a wild hangman's dance at the end of its string. As the actor lies, quivering and bloody on the floor, I crouch beside him and unsheath my dad's knife. I can feel rage, feel hatred, overwhelming me and forcing my hands towards his chin. I can't see the jester, but somehow I just know he's behind me, peering intently at the dying man on the floor. The old man stares past me, into the creature's empty eyes. "Let's see who's under the mask," I snarl. The knife flickers in the waltzing light. So, I lie low for a while after that. Or at least I try to. I visit friends in town, friends that I thought I could trust, only to find the actors one step ahead of me every time. Ricky, Brian, even Mira, who I've not spoken to since she dropped out of school last year. Every time they try to talk me down, telling me to turn myself in. The one pretending to be Ricky slammed the door in my face, and I was so sure I heard the real Ricky screaming from inside that I chased after him. After I dispatched the fake, I searched the whole house, but to no avail. Now I think back to them and the way they tried to trick me. It's for the best, they tell me. They plead so convincingly, and I start to think that maybe the only real thing about them is the fear that I caused when I fought back. But even if I want to turn myself in, I can't. I know it's a trap. Brian had his TV on, and while I was holding him down trying to find the seam onto his mask, I saw Sheriff Moore giving a press conference, turning me into a monster with honeyed words, making me the enemy of all the townsfolk. I sunk the knife behind Brian's ear and got up to turn the TV off. I saw the outline of the jester, reflected in the screen in the fraction of a second it took for the light of the picture to fade, but he wasn't there when I turned around. Anyhow, you know that Sheriff Moore was a good friend of my old man, right? Used to rocket up to our house for coffee when he was supposed to be on highway duty. I'd know an imposter when I saw one. The knowledge that I'm on my own here is strangely comforting, though. I don't know what's happened to the folks in my life. Don't know how far the rot goes, how many people they've replaced, but it's all or nothing, you know? I'm going to keep killing them until the jester stops laughing. Keep killing them until I've gotten to the bottom of all this. Look, you've been real patient, and I've got to thank you for that. The reason I've contacted you is this. What with all the cops buzzing around and my close friends and relatives, well, you know. Long story short, I crossed state lines, and I'm in town. 2 minutes away, actually, in the coffee place we went to once, remember? Sure you do. Anyway, I'm on my way over now. I just need a place to lay my head for the night. I know we've not seen each other in a long time, but I was sure I could trust you not to be one of them. I can trust you, can't I? Anyway, I'll be over in a second. Bye.
I used to go diving a lot. Not so much anymore, but a couple of years ago I was really into it. Had my license and everything. It's really beautiful down there. The paled, patterned sand. The water washing away the distance like a blue mist. And flashes of the brightest colors you've ever seen as some fish dart into view. I've done my fair share of exploring wrecks and grottos, but my favorite thing to do is hover right where the shelf plunges into the deep. You get the greatest dynamics there as deep-sea creatures come up to feed. Anyway, one time I was drifting along near Antigua about 40 feet down. I had 2 tanks with me so I could stay down for several hours. The shelf sloped off to my left, and rocks and coral broke the monotony of the sand to my right. I hadn't seen much that day, and was getting a bit bored. But then I noticed a large octopus. It was a deep-sea type, probably washed up accidentally. They don't usually come up to hunt. It seemed sluggish, and didn't react much when I drifted over to it. Now, octopi aren't very friendly creatures. If you manage to get near one, they usually flee within seconds. I'm sure you've seen videos of them changing colors to match their environment. Not all species can do that, but they're all very good at hiding. So seeing a deep-sea octopus up close and personal was quite an opportunity. It was about a foot from crown to beak and dark, mottled green. Its tentacles curled around it, perhaps 4 feet long when extended, and pale on the underside. Its eyes looked like golden rings around narrowed black pupils. It was having trouble moving and looked half dead. I decided to try to get near it. There are some yellow-tailed jacks nearby, and I speared one with my knife. Sorry if that offends you, I'm not one of those touch-nothing divers. Cautiously, I approached the octopus and offered it my fish, shoving it ahead of me and letting it drift towards the creature. Success. It didn't run, but lazily reached an arm out to capture the morsel. It brought it under its beak and began to devour it. I drifted closer, trying to acclimate it to my presence. Over maybe an hour or so, it became more lively and used to my presence. Apparently I had bought its tolerance with my offering, and it even began to play a little bit, darting away from me, and then coming right back. I had a stick with me that I used to test holes and mud and such, and it occurred to me that maybe I could teach it to play fetch. I brought the stick out and waved it until it seemed like I had its attention, and then threw the stick out sideways. It didn't go very far underwater, of course, but the octopus went after it and grabbed hold of it with its tentacle. It didn't seem inclined to return to me, though, so I swam closer. It was waving the stick at me, and then it tossed it out to the side. It was copying me. I retrieved the stick, and then an interesting idea came into my head. Next to us was a large, flat rock covered in half an inch of mud and detritus. Careful not to disturb the layers, I took the stick and slowly drew a crude figure of a man. 2 legs, 2 arms, and a round head coming off a central cylinder. The octopus seemed to be watching with interest. I tossed it the stick, and it caught it easily. It sat there toying with it, and for a few moments I thought my expectations had been too high. But then it reached out with the stick and began tracing its own mark in the mud. It was even cruder than mine, to be sure, but clearly drawing. However, the proportions were all wrong. It had fused the head and the body into one ball, and there were too many legs. I was just happy it was copying me. I'd heard octopi are smart, but this was really something. But then it hit me like a freezing wave. The octopus wasn't copying my drawing, it was drawing itself. The implications for this were huge. If I had had a video camera then, I would be a famous man today. The only other animal I'm aware of that is capable of the imagination, self-awareness to do something like that is the ape, first cousin to humans. The idea that the ancient octopus, without so much as a spinal column, had the mental capacity for such a feat would surely have turned biology on its head. However, I didn't have a camera, and the scientists I've told my story to greet it with understandable skepticism. I would put all my time into trying to prove it myself, but I just can't bring myself to go diving anymore. Anyway, once that realization stuck, I got excited. The octopus passed the stick back, and I began drawing other sea creatures and common sights. We kept on for what felt like an hour, and the octopus contributed as much as I. It even drew something I took to be a crude figure of a submarine, with a con tower, propeller screw, and even torpedo holes. Finally, the octopus led me to the other side of the rock, a blank canvas. Far down in the corner, it again drew itself, and then me. These figures were very small, maybe an inch or 2 tall. Then, painstakingly, it went to work on a much larger drawing. At first, I thought it was a whale, but whales are roughly the size of submarines, so it didn't seem to justify the scale. Furthermore, the proportions were all wrong. This seemed like something more humped and compact, almost as if it were upright rather than aquiline. And it had weird bits sticking out of it that didn't seem like fins. I couldn't place it. An oil platform, maybe? No, the lines were too natural. An octopus wouldn't know what the top of a platform looked like. When the drawing was done, we both sat and looked at it for a while. I took the stick back from the octopus and circled the drawing of us, and then drew a line to the thing. I'm not sure if the octopus picked up on my confusion, but because it just sort of sat there for a while. It didn't try to take the stick back. Then it started swimming away. I followed it a distance, but it seemed to be keeping a pace, leading me on. Then it turned and shot out into the deep area of the shelf. I was a good way through my second tank and wasn't supposed to go any deeper, so I had to let go. It stopped once to watch me, and then darted off, dissolving into the dark blue depths. I looked after it for a few minutes to see if it would return, but there was nothing. So I started watching the other fish and making my way slowly back to the boat. Then, suddenly, there was a low thrumming sound all around me. It wasn't very loud, but it was big, as if it came from the ocean floor itself. I've heard of underwater eruptions, but I've never been in one, and I wondered if I was about to be. But this didn't sound like anything natural. It sounded like the call of some animal, slowed down into the virtually subsonic range and projected from huge speakers very far away. I've had a chance to look over the seismograph recordings for that day, and nothing shows up at that time for that frequency. I have no idea why. The fish were going crazy, darting back and forth and all heading inland. And not just the reef fish, larger ones from deeper in were streaming by me even faster. Suddenly, among them, the octopus appeared again. It, or one quite like it. It swam up to me and eyed me strangely, then darted past with the rest. The thrumming sounded again. Looking out to sea, I gradually become more aware of a large, dark patch. It was very hard to tell how big or far away it was, but there was clearly plenty of both to go around. It was hard to tell more than just a shadow in the murky water, but it clearly wasn't a whale or anything man-made. I couldn't even tell if it was a single creature. There seemed to be long strands like kelp or jellyfish tentacles streaming off of it, but immeasurably larger. It looked like nothing so much as an ancient, misshapen section of coral reef broke off and floating. At least the part I could see. It seemed to fade off into the distance as though that mass, immense as it may be, was only a limb to some far larger entity. I have never seen a naval carrier from underwater, but I imagine that the kind of shadow it would cast was nothing like what I saw. The thrumming rang out a third time. An unreasoning fear seized me. I didn't appear to be in danger, though the thing was vaster than anything I'd ever seen. It was too far away to reach me quickly, and it seemed like it wouldn't fit into the shallows. Nevertheless, I was gripped by the feeling that if I didn't get away as fast as I could, I would be dragged down into the abyss and consumed. I could feel the very water itself drawing me back down into the black maw, heedless of the depth or my equipment. I surged upwards. As I rose, of course, I began cramping, but I clawed my way up anyway. I was still far from the boat. When I broke the surface, I could barely move. I had to keep my mouthpiece in because I couldn't keep my mouth above water. I certainly couldn't call or signal the boat. Far from receding, my panic was worse than ever. From above the water, I couldn't see the thing or tell whether it was coming for me. I thrashed my slow, painful way towards the boat. Finally, someone on board noticed me, and they came to pick me up. I had the bends bad, and had to stay in a hospital for a few weeks until I was over it. The doctors tell me I was lucky not to get a stroke or some other permanent damage. So that's my story. I'm sorry I can't give a more satisfying conclusion. I still don't know what happened myself. My friends think it was some form of rapture, but it just doesn't match the symptoms. Narcosis is supposed to reduce anxiety, not stimulate it, and my hallucinations, if that's what they were too vivid and specific. Anyway, since then I've been afraid of the water. I tried going out once or twice, but all I can do is stay shaking in the boat. I think there really was something out there, but I don't think it's something I ever want to come across again.
Long gone are the days of wrestling with road maps, searching desperately for certain road signs, and sheepishly swallowing your pride to ask locals for directions. Today, in the modern world of technology and convenience, you rely on a GPS to get where you need to be. You trust its direction to lead you through foreign territory to your ultimate destination, and back home promptly. It tells you to go left. You go left. It tells you to go right. You go right. It tells you to exit the highway. You do. The threat of taking a wrong turn and prolonging your journey prevents you from defying the device, regardless of what your intuition tells you. But you still question it sometimes. Like now. Your destination is just as irrelevant as who you're meeting or why you're going there. All that matters is that, without your GPS, you would have no idea where you are. You've been driving for a couple hours now, but you've only covered a fraction of the total distance. As the sun begins to fall, you watch the scenery pass with skepticism. You don't know much about where you're going, but it certainly isn't suburban. Regardless, the population seems to be drastically thinning with each passing mile. Turn right, drive straight for 3 miles, take another right. Skepticism slowly blooms into nervousness as the cow town gives way to a full-fledged forest. Night has fallen. You knew you wouldn't reach your destination until the early morning hours, but that hadn't troubled you. You had expected an endless highway, the path ahead marked brightly with a spattering of streetlights and taillights. Reality brought none of that. Even the gentle moonlight that had lent a softer impact to the towns you've passed has been completely blocked by the withered leaves dangling from interlocking tree cover above. The darkness is stifling, growing an almost menacing edge as you follow the gently twisting, unlit road further into the brush. The windows are closed and the heat is blasting, but goosebumps still prickle across your arms in an effort to fight an inexplicable chill. Even the comforting familiarity of the shitty pop songs playing on the radio doesn't dampen the fear settling in the pit of your stomach. Just keep going straight for 11 miles, your GPS says. Then you'll be turning onto an eastward-bound highway. Then everything will be okay, right? Judging by your white-knuckle grip of the steering wheel, you aren't very convinced of that. You're considering turning back, strongly considering it. but that would require stopping. And while it feels like a million eyes are glaring daggers at you from the brush, you like to think that you're safe while you're moving. Your headlights slice through the darkness blanketing the road ahead, but leave everything else draped in an impenetrable blackness. Even with your high beams on, visibility of anything beyond the immediate is minimal. With 4 miles to go, you're pushing your car into each turn with nerve-wracking speed, but somehow your fear of crashing seems to be less important than your need to get out. Then your GPS goes black. The sudden darkness is jarring. Your eyes fly to the device, dearly hoping that it lost its signal. Why would it go black? Or was turned off? By whom? Or it just needed to be plugged in? Who unplugged it? Or you tear your eyes from the machine long enough to catch a shock of blonde hair, a boyish face stretched by surprise, and wide, clear blue eyes. It lasts only a second, then your frame, your car, your world is shaken by a sickening thump. You slam on the brakes on reflex, tires screaming to a stop. This is where it gets dangerous. This is where you have a choice. On one hand, you could choose to disregard the lessons that every horror movie has taught you, swallow your fears rooted in the darkness thriving all around you, and ignore the voice in your head screaming at you to get the fuck out of there and open your car door. On the other hand, you could take the other option offered by that crucial moment. You can listen to that voice in your head. Put your fear for your own life before the one that you may have inadvertently ended. Heed the words that you've screamed at numerous television screens in the past, and don't fucking go out there. You gather all the courage you can muster and take option 1. As you step from the perceived safety of your vehicle, you feel an inexplicable calm wash over you. With each step you take from the driver's seat to the back of the car, you feel the knots of uneasiness firmly tied in your stomach dissipate. By the time you peer beyond the trunk of your car, any malice you thought you felt is completely gone, replaced with the gentle tranquility of a mid-fall night. When you're greeted by the sight of an empty road, you laugh quietly to yourself. It must have been a bump in the road, you decide, and your paranoid mind just conjured the imaginary boy as a reason for it. What would a boy even be doing in the woods alone at this hour? You marvel at how silly you've been acting as you sit back in your car, noting with relief that your GPS is happily displaying your route again, and shifting into drive and continuing the journey. The darkness of the woods has lost its menacing edge. Instead, there is just the comfortable ambience of the thriving forest's wildlife calling into the night. You find your way out of the forest and onto the highway without complaint. You move at an unhurried pace, but you cover the distance much faster than you would expect. You arrive at your destination sooner than anyone, including yourself, thought possible. When you try to return home, your GPS routes an entirely different course that takes hours longer, but it insists that it is the fastest. Even when you try to consult a map, you simply cannot figure out how you got there so quickly. The event will be a bit of a mystery, but not worth the energy that would be spent by continuing to wonder about it. But what happens if you take the second option? You prepare to find out when, instead of opening the door, you speed away from the scene, heart hammering in your chest, because holy hell, what just happened? When you glance in your rearview mirror and see a pair of clear blue eyes staring back at you, you begin to realize that perhaps you've made a horrible mistake. Or maybe that you should have fled without that second of hesitation. Because seriously, what the fuck was that? Your breath is coming in labored puffs as you begin to hyperventilate. The radio cuts off from the generic love song that was playing, replacing it with a deafening silence. Tears are prickling at your eyes, because what the fuck when your GPS blinks back to life? You release a sobbing cry of relief, thanking every deity you can think of for, oh Christ.
Left turn, to the end, in 3 miles.
The tinny, halting voice of the GPS cut through your hope that this was over. You grab the machine, praying with all your heart that you heard it wrong. But no. There it is. Bland print, firmly displayed on the screen. Your stomach drops like a stone. You want to turn around. You really, really do. But then you would definitely run into whatever that was again. You watch the tree line for an opening big enough for your car, but it's just too dense. Even if you got past the outer ring, the forest would definitely be too thick within. Driving straight ahead is your only option, and you hate it.
Left turn, to the end, in 2 miles.
Tears are rolling down your cheeks unabated, and gasping sobs rack your frame. Your radio crackles back to life, releasing a torrent of whispering voices from your speakers. Among the nondescript voices, the loudest is that of a young boy. You can hear tears in his voice, but he's laughing. It's wobbly and feeble, but grows in strength as you continue forward.
Left turn, to the end, in 1 mile.
You start seeing him. You barely catch a glimpse of him each time, nearly hidden amongst the brush as he is. Every couple of seconds, your frantically darting eyes will fall upon his clear blue ones as he watches you from the trees. It's the boy you hid. The first time you spotted him, he just stared at you, completely expressionless and ordinary. You know you've stopped breathing, but you've forgotten how to start again. Each time you see him, he's a step closer to the road, and his face is slowly contorting into a manic grin. Bile rises in your throat, forcing your lungs back to work with a gagging cough of an exhale. The laughter from your speakers is deafening. He's in the road now. He just stands there, appearing closer to the middle each time. You don't have to swerve to avoid him yet, but you feel like that won't last long.
Left turn, to the end, in 0.1 mile.
Your headlights go out. You almost feel relieved. You won't have to see those eyes anymore. On reflex, your foot jams on the brakes, only to find them useless. When the accelerator compresses itself fully, you start laughing. This is the end, isn't it? Took long enough to get here. But then you remember that you don't want to die. With each wispy chuckle comes a gasping sob, as the dim light offered by your car's position lights reveals a tree in your path. That brief moment of acceptance resolves into defiance. You snap the wheel hard to the left, pulling your car into a diagonal skid. Impact is inevitable, but when you hear that terrible crunch, your momentum pulls you to the passenger seat instead of the windshield, saving your head, but tearing your abdomen. Your world becomes pain and a cacophony of squealing metal. Your seatbelt is cutting a line of fire across your chest, and whiplash leaves your head spinning. A metallic taste is slowly filling your mouth, and everything hurts. But when the wreckage of your car settles, you are alive. You've won. It's over. You laugh. You laugh and laugh until your lungs hurt, which admittedly isn't very long. You struggle to regain your breath, but it catches in your throat. Your heart stops. Dread rises in your gut. You still hear laughter crackling over the radio. The whispering has stopped, and the boy is quieter than before. Not as tinny, but definitely still there. Your heart stops when you realize it isn't coming from the radio. He's there, with you, in the car now, behind you. Your eyes fly to your rearview mirror and are caught by Blue. His eyes pin you where you sit. You see pain and madness in them, despite the smile contorting his features. His cheeks are wet with tears. You feel his bony fingers on your face as they reach for your eyes and press down. Your body takes pity on you. You fall unconscious before you feel the pain. It takes 6 hours for your body to be found. It will be right where you left it, strapped into the wreckage of your car, discovered in the wee hours of the morning by a well-meaning hunter. The disused road on which it is found is hundreds of miles away from anywhere you had any business being. Your injuries are just as curious. There are some understandable fractured ribs, subsequent internal bleeding, and maybe hemorrhaging in the brain from the crash. Your eyes, however, are gone, inexplicably gouged from your head, nowhere to be found. Upon inspection, none of your injuries caused your death. Your heart simply stopped beating. Your death is a mystery to the police. They treat it as a possible homicide, but ultimately, it gets tossed into the cold case bin. The report does take note of something strange, though. From when you were first discovered, until the lead detective shouts for someone to shut the infernal thing off, your GPS is on, caught repeating the same phrase over and over.
You have arrived.
A bump in the road jerked me awake. I blinked heavily. The day was still in its prime, as I could see the sun through the trees beyond the backseat window. "We're almost here, son." I rubbed my eyes and sat up from my brief slumber. Dad was twiddling with the radio idly. A sweet tune crackled into life. My feet swung tenderly several inches from the floor of the car. I smiled as my dad hummed along in a squeaky tone. His throat let out creaks and groans as he strained to hit higher notes. My mom sighed mockingly at him, pulling the steering wheel to bring us around a swift corner. As we hit another bump, I hear a faint jingling sound. "What was that?" I asked. My dad turned slightly. His hand reached down the neck of his shirt. He pulled out what looked like an army recruiting tag. I had seen ones like it on television, when I had been allowed to stay up to watch the occasional war film. He handed it to me from the passenger seat. On closer inspection, I realized it wasn't a dog tag, though it was a beaded metal chain that went with one. Hanging from it was an intricate metal emblem. It looked only like swirls and curves to me. In the center were the words, "For now and always, Sharon." I rubbed it in my palm. I realized Mom had given it to Dad for his birthday. It was one of those presents that they hadn't told me about, because it was for them. A gift from her to him. I didn't mind that, and so I said nothing more about it. I handed it back. Dad slipped it on again, and I smiled to myself, thinking about the two of them being all slushy. As a young boy, I was of course reserved in my understanding of love. I wasn't yet aware of the varieties that were out there. I only knew there was that of my closest family. As we sat there on the journey home, I thought about what it would be like when I got home. It had been busy a few days prior to the present. Choosing a cake for Dad had been a challenge for me. As I had not known of his appreciation for sports, tied between golf and football, I had inevitably chosen the football-shaped cake, feeling it was the safest choice after consulting with my mother. The celebration had been a pleasing one, if not a little secluded for me. I had pounced on my dad the moment the clock struck 8, as he lay in bed beside Mom. I had watched as he unwrapped his presents, a dark tie, a coffee mug, imprinted with a joke I did not understand, but one which nevertheless seemed to put my dad in a fit of chuckling. Finally he opened his cards. He always did the cards last. One for me and Mom, handcrafted by yours truly. He would smile a sweet smile as Mom leaned across and kissed him on the cheek. The rest of the day would consist of us padding around in our pajamas. I would bob around for most of the day before retiring to my bedroom in the evening for dinner. There I would draw, read one of my latest books given to me, by my mom. They were cookbooks. I'd been pestering my mom one day when she was cooking, and her reluctance to humor me after several minutes must have drove her to provide me with the nearest reading material at hand. "Try these out," she told me. "It'd be good for you to learn a thing or two." She grinned at me, and I bustled along, preoccupied with chocolate-covered thoughts of baking. The car eventually pulled into our driveway, and I sighed, reminiscing of the nature walk earlier that day. My triumph when finding a frog in the footpath had pleased me to no end, especially when my dad had crouched down beside me and suggested that I carry it to a lake farther afield. Seeing his grin and that boyish sparkle in his eye made me churn with pleasure. I always felt that, despite of being an only child, I had the very best substitute for a brother. My dad was the best of both for me. I did not see him as one or the other. Even when he was tired and not in the mood to play with me, he would always have a certain glimmer in his eye that kept me comforted. I felt it wouldn't be long before his next burst of energy, and this kept me patient between our activities. The three of us stretched as we exited the car. The light was beginning to fade from the sky, and the chill was descending. We marched to our door, puffing clouds, as Dad fumbled for the key. We shuffled in through the door. Neither of our neighbors were around to spout greetings and postpone my parents' arrival inside. Mom pushed the door and locked it, and we hung up our coats in the closet. I flicked off my shoes and headed into the living room, but Dad had beaten me to it. He slumped into his usual space on the sofa and turned the television to the news program. I expelled a huff as I trudged to the spot on the other sofa. I never liked the news. Mom followed me in and curled up next to my dad. It is at this point that I chose to directly address the reader. Up to this point, I have recalled the majority of what seems like an ideal day in the life of a young boy. That so far is the case. Sadly, this is not a mere recollection of my memories, or better days gone by. This is a declaration, one of which I have devoted my entirety of my well-being to. As I write my life's greatest climax, my hands shake upon the page. This is due mainly to the age of my current self. Of course, there are other reasons behind my condition too, but all of this is to come. Just be hesitant, because if you proceed, you face only a consequence, one which I myself have no shame in inflicting upon you. I felt I was beginning to grasp certain aspects of my parents' body language. As time went on, I was picking up on characteristics of their more secluded nature. As a child of 8, I was usually buzzing with some sort of energy throughout the day. However, when it came to nighttime, I always had some nervous reservations. It wasn't clear to me at the time, but I was a very clingy boy at that age. When it came to new experience beyond the range of my parents, I always struggled. This didn't get to me, because my parents never emphasized on the matter or made me feel bad about it. Don't get me wrong, I did try to get on with other kids at school, and try new clubs, and all that, and broaden my horizons when it came to leaving the house and go explore. These things were just a bit of a challenge for me, as can be understood for such a primal age. Unfortunately, unknown to me then, I was somewhat lacking in the ability to advance in my independence. I clung to my parents in the face of the uncertain. Even in some trivial cases. One of these cases was the nighttime routine. Apparently I had always had a poor relationship with the darkness. My mom told me about the time I cried in my cot for 5 hours at their bedside, despite over 6 separate sessions of nursing me back to sleep. This was a regular routine for them when I was in infancy, according to Mom. I guess that part of our mental wiring can stick with us longer than naturally intended. At least, that's how I try to see it. I can't help but feel weakness and shame, looking back now, of course. But back then, I was just glad to have my parents around the next corner, at all times. I looked up at the clock across from the television. It was coming to 9:30. This was close to normal time for my lights out. I swiveled my gaze towards Mom and Dad. They were very tired. Mom stirred, rising up in her seat and stretching her arms out. Dad rubbed his eyes, standing up. He went to reach for the remote. "I think it's about time now there, Squirt." I stared at the pale light of the television. The heating was now dying down now, and a slight chill was creeping up on me. Mom gazed over as she headed for the doorway. She seemed to be thinking. "You know, you can stay up for a little while longer if you want." Suddenly my mind froze. They were off to bed, upstairs. I wasn't particularly tired. My palms were already clammy from the mixed temperatures of the room. Somehow the distance between me and them seemed to slowly double. I looked down at the floor between me and them. Cold light threw along the shadows and across the carpeted floor. The breeze outside beginning to amplify. Rustling leaves were now assortment of jagged masses scraping their way towards the door. My dad saw my face going pale. I had not yet answered them. I felt alone. Perched on the sofa by myself, I heard my dad exhale from his nose. I knew what that meant. I knew I was disappointing them both, again. But at that point, I cared not, for fear of leaving, and then, I knew what that meant. I knew I was disappointing them both again. But at that point, I cared not, for fear of them leaving, and even closing the door behind them. I swallowed again. I was so focused on them that I spotted my dad's head tilted slightly lower than before. These signs were becoming clearer to me throughout each month. However, despite my understandings of the frustrations I caused, I still pursued them. It was a pathetic move on my part. One that I followed through one time too many. I shudder thinking about how little time they must have had together when I began to develop over the years. I was a full-time burden on them, more so than most of the children my age. My mom leaned in the doorway, giving me an, "Oh, come on then, look." I rose to my feet and followed behind them, making sure I was not the last to reach the top. The upstairs light was flickered on as I went to turn on my own. My bedroom lay before me, as semi-tidy as ever. My books and toys were along both sides, both simply scraped to the edge, to remove them from the main floor space. Having them already brushed my teeth, I moved over to the bed and climbed in. Rustling from the bathroom drew close, and my mother padded into the room to see me off to sleep. I brushed aside several toys and sat down at my bedside, causing me to roll in towards her slightly. I took the opportunity to have one more intoxicating embrace with her. The warmth of her hug dissolved me as my insecurities slipped away. Lying back on the mattress, my eyes drew shut as my mother planted a tender kiss on my cheek. What a high that gave me. Internally, my body fluttered as I began to drift steadily into a sweet, sweet slumber. My bed creaked slightly, and I felt the weight of her fade away. Far off, I hear the sound of my door closing. My mind seems to swirl in and out of consciousness, sweeping over an impossible landscape of vast beauty. I am free once more. Free of fear or phobia. From guilt. I feel the presence of the two closest to my heart holding me up, carrying me across this plane. What bliss I do taste in my undeveloped soul. This tranquil world consumes me for what I will always remember as an eternity. An eternity I wish could have ended there. It seems there was a different plan for me. Up ahead, in my mind's eye, I saw an approaching mass. It was hard to define, as was any part of this dream. We often forget our dreams, be it in an instant, upon waking, or gradually over time. But some can stick. This one has, due to circumstances that follow. In my mind, an unseen force pulls me into a new realm. The hazy comfort around me is becoming tinted with gray, and the darkness starts to enclose me. I materialize arms and legs, so I might fend off the hostility. I'm on my back, staring up into a sky scarred with tears, and that are now consuming the light. My body squirms and I attempt to flee. Something holds me down. I cannot rise. From beneath me, I feel the ground begin to crumble. It shakes and cracks, and I feel lumps pushing into me, as the world takes on a new form. I'm kicking out an ever-shrinking womb, and it has no intent of protecting me, and I try to scream, but the void takes away my voice. The ground rumbles, and I finally gasp into the real world. The shaking in my mind withers. My heart fluctuates, and my hands clench the bedsheets. I stare up at the bedroom ceiling, my eyes bulging and my body shaking. Am I truly awake? Of this I am uncertain. A bump in the mattress jerked my attention. The twist in my head to the side. It takes a minute or two for me to realize. My body shook, but it was not me that was shaking. Looking down, I see the bed I lie in. It is juddering, and I judder with it. I convulsed beneath me, my spine jerked with the thrust of the surface. It began riddling me with furious pumps of force. I clasped the edges of the covers in my hands. I dare not open my eyes now. Its violent outbursts grew in intensity until I was rising and falling non-stop, and it terrified me to my core. How was this even possible? I let out a whimper. But under the ferocious rumbling of the mattress, it was drowned out. It sounded as if tearing was beginning to emerge from its unnaturally loud symphony. I begged at the darkness within my eyelids that this soul-destroying event would cease all existence. I prayed to be spared, but with each moment, each torturous twist and jolt grew stronger. I began to ache. My body ached as much as my mind. I felt like I was going to pass out or burst from the fear. To be utterly helpless in the face of the complete unknown is an experience I do not wish upon anybody. I did not yet know it, but this close-quarter invader was not as alien to me as I feared. Never again do I vow to speak of these circumstances, for as I write this, My heart bleeds and my soul splits. I sit here alone, not daring to think of it. It's been too many years. If I was to dwell beyond these words that I condemn to you, I would not last another night on this earth. My mind, my heart, can take it no more. From here on, the burden of this recollection rests on you. The ends of the mattress jerked up and down. The lumps were changing. No longer was it any way soft. I felt penetrating angles in my back. They seemed to surface beneath the material of the mattress. Gritty textures rub against me. A spring cried out as it gave me another strain. My heart was now in my mouth. I gargled a cry for help. Through tears I finally dared squint to my doorway. My false hope drove me to seek out my father. Never in all my life have I been so internally desperate for his aid. Why could they not hear me? A dark sadness broke me that night. I shrunk back into the past. I was smaller. I was afraid. I was powerless. I cried. I cried for my mom. I cried for my dad. My arms trembled as I hugged myself. I felt so cold. In that moment, I was greeted by a new feeling beneath me. Warmth touched my shoulders. It traveled at a disturbing speed to the base of the mattress. Now there was a source of heat, curdling around my body. It seemed to gush between spaces, creating pockets of denser intensity. The whole mattress felt liquid. It still accommodated jagged protrusions and solid lumps, but now it seemed to have encased them in a partially jellified substance. The heat made this infinitely unpleasant. It was at that point, after seemingly hours of mind-warping terror, that I finally salvaged the courage to remove myself. I kicked out sideways, flicking my duvet away from my legs. I kicked out sideways. As I sat up, I flung over again. The sheets vibrated off the bed. I followed, sitting up a second time, to finally throw myself toward and off the end of the bed. In the darkness, my foot struck a post of the bed, and my struggle to escape its range. My hands scrambled for the door. All the while, my bed groaned. It moaned and twisted. The frame thudded against the carpeted floor. It seemed to contain some animalistic rage. I turned from the wall and pressed my body against it as tightly as possible, as I stared upon it wholly for the first time. I was given a full view of the spectacle. It was as if I was watching a creature, decapitated and free of limbs. The body writhed on the bed frame as it contorted into horrific, lively poses. The surface was beginning to stain. Even in the dull slits of the night coming from my blinds, I could not depict the details of a liquid seeping through the seams. A churning rose up over the muffled croaking of the fabric. To my dread, I could see the mattress swelling up, and it took on a hunched posture as the center rose up from the bed frame. Eventually, the stitching began to give out at the corners. Spurts of warm liquid leaked through the slits of the floor. Spittle licked at my bare legs. I screamed. I did a rapid dance, trying to shake off the substance, but I dared not touch it with my hands. I squealed out for Mom and Dad. I yelled at them with high volume. Somehow the door handle evaded my reach. I kept searching with my fingertips. I was too afraid to look away from the spewing sack of fluids. It had a presence. It seemed angry. My hands scraped at the paintwork as I searched, relying only on my sense of touch to guide me. I felt something cold. Finally, I grasped the handle tightly. As I did this, the atmosphere changed. I swear the temperature rose by several degrees. Right in front of me, before my eyes, I saw the bulk of the mattress rise up. It arced backwards, towering above me. The noise droned in my ears. A deep and heavy moan bounced off my walls, and inside my head, it sounded almost vocal. Like a person groaning from immense abdominal pain. As I cried out, it shook hideously, The ground vibrated under my feet. The desk knocked against the wall. The lamp fell on its platform. My hand, having been immobile for this seemingly infinite moment, jerked downward. The door beside me wrenched open. Light from the hallway poured in and filled the edges of the room. To my devastation, the mattress let out a final piercing cry of a soaring pitch. Its dripping mass was suspended before me. The twitching and writhing suddenly ceased before the whole form collapsed, coming to rest motionless on my bed frame. Dust rose up in the ray of light. I turned on my heels and ran to my room. I reached my parents' door. The door was a crack open. Charging it aside, I burst into the room at the foot of their bed. My throat was dry and my eyes were puffed, and I was blurred of vision. My fingers gripped their sheets as I wheezed. I had shouted for them all the way down the hallway, and I still panted for them, saying their names over and over, but I focused on the bed, at the spaces where they would lay each night. My heart sank. My courage shrunk away as I gaped that empty space ahead of me. The sheets were crumpled, similar to the way they were in my room, on mornings when I was too tired to maintain them, once I dressed for school. They looked unfamiliarly messy. I knew Mom would never have left them in that state. Even when rising for a late night bathroom visit, she would always have the corner of the duvet folded over. My dad had told me humorously one evening. He joked that she would always have a high maintenance in the bedroom, and that it was always unwise to ever leave an unmade bed. The bed was in her centerpiece, and she would always have it in a fashion that would welcome her on her return each night. The state it was in was not dramatically visual, but it unsettled me. The covers were still on the bed. They had not been thrown off in a rush, nor had they been left unattended. They were rumpled in pieces, where they both should have been sleeping. I edged around to the side that my dad slept on and tugged down on the covers. Their shapes imprinted on the mattress, ever so slightly. But that's all I could see. The lining of the mattress was also rumpled. What is going on? My breathing was starting to calm down a little as I paddled around the bed. Dazed in disbelief, the house was silent. The only mild comfort was the hallway light peering into my parents' room, and my own. I looked back into the passage. Could they have gone downstairs? I crept step by step into the dim light. My feet stopped at the edge of the stairs. I could still see them on the bottom, but there was no hint of life. The only sounds came from me, from my heart still in my mouth. Sweat cooled on my forehead, as well as a tad bit of saliva on my cheek. I wiped my face with the sleeve, while standing idly at the top, staring down at the dreary darkness. For some internal reason, I had no urge to call out for them. The house seemed to be filled with absence. It's hard to explain. It was like being stuck in a negative pressure. It felt that there was less of the space. I know how ridiculous this may sound to you. I know what I felt that night. Had I known what lay in the store only moments away, I probably would have run from the house. Sadly, I knew nothing of what truth sat from mere meters of me. This night was, and still is, the ultimatum of my life, which will never spare me a moment of peace. Never again would I exist in reality. To this day I have not slept, dreamt, nor truly lived for a single moment of my decreasing existence. I am but a shell of a boy once broken. The air was cold to the taste. There seemed to be a faint breeze that only struck me as it passed my lips and hit the back of my throat. It cooled my mind for a passing second. A final comfort, unbeknownst to me. My head turned once again to my room. Images of distorted surfaces and oozing innards scraped my sanity. My hand trembled of its own accord by my side. A musky taint came through the opening of the doorway. It seemed to fog up the entrance marginally. It was beginning to produce an aroma. My nostrils caught a hint of something. My heart hit the roof of my rib cage. I had no idea what it was. All I knew is that it was the most foulest stench I had ever endured. In a trance, I turned myself toward the doorway. My foot stretched out, and I made progress toward it. Another step followed. My upper body did not move. I glided in slow motion into the mist. My lips sealed back up. As the wave gained strength, they triggered flashbacks of the jerking, the failing rage, the impossible thrusts of energy that imploded out of a seemingly harmless part of my life. Flashes and spattering remnants invaded my thoughts. I shuddered from head to toe. My breathing strained once more. I raised a digit, pressing it against the door. I pushed it forward. It creaked inwards a foot or two. My foot followed. As it trusted on my carpet, my big toe felt the flecks of fluid, adjusting to my stance. I ventured until I was beyond the doorway, standing beside a spot I had bared witness to the final horrors of that night. Or so I thought. There it was, still motionless. My heart seemed to be demanding more space in my chest with each inch I covered across the floor. Despite my inner terror, and the tears and confusion in my eyes, I managed to proceed. My mind's eye told me there was no other option for me. There seemed no sense in running or calling out anymore. If I had stopped back then to think about it, I may have questioned the state of my fright. But looking back, I know why I knew where to go. It hurts to understand. It will torture me to the end of my days. My hand came up to my side, still quivering. The mattress began to get cleaner amongst the shadows. My eyes were still adjusting from the light of the hall. Then it dawned on me. The light switch. I turned back slightly and reached out. With the click of the room was brought out of darkness. It stung for a moment, but I managed to blink off the effect. Looking ahead of me, I wished that I had not done so. The yellow haze showed up the aftermath of the traumatic night all too clearly. Somehow turning on the light had brought my senses to a new level. Nothing could be hidden from my fragile mind anymore. And now the stench, with gut-wrenching power, could be directly connected to the source. I swallowed back, sick in my mouth. My eyes watered as I stared, unable to blink at the god-awful mess facing me. The colors of the crisis were not as significant to me at the time that they are now. Both reds clashed with patches of dark on every part of my once safe haven. Decay filled the air with a reek that hunched me over. As I brought up dessert, I suddenly began to shake all over. But this was not just fear. It was becoming rage. It boiled up in my chest as I tilted my head up towards the crime scene. I suddenly burst out in a violent accusation. I screamed at my bed in disbelief. My head spun as I questioned reality, feeling a new source of energy. I clutched at a pencil pot and hurled the mass of gore. I burst into tears from the frustration. I fell to my knees and wept out of complete helplessness. I felt no comfort in the silence. My head hung at the foot of my bed. As a tear dropped to the floor, my eye caught a glint. The light was hitting the smallest hint of something. I leaned up to get a better look through my teary gaze. It was sticking out of the split seams of the mattress, lifting one knee as if I was proposing. I leaned in and examined it. The smell seemed to be more distant now that I was distracted by this item. It hung from the gap in the material. It dripped with... I was still not sure. At least that's what I told myself. I guess I knew even then, as a child, but our parents work hard to build us up for the real world. And one thing many of them teach us is that sometimes we have to put certain things to the back of our mind. I was taught that given circumstances when things seemed unfair or too overwhelming to bear, that sometimes blurring reality was my lifeline. This was meant to aid me through my homework, teach me a lesson in the long run, but now it took effect within me. And I was aware that this was one of the most treasured lessons my father had ever taught me. I felt the warm hint of pride that I had always treasured when I saw the glint of my father's eyes. The sign that let me know in my young soul that he was proud of me. My hand touched the surface of the mattress for the first time in what seemed like hours. It was moist, and it was red. It slipped my finger beneath the protrusion. I curled it up tightly and pulled. The mattress burst. I was swept over by a torrent of juice. My torso deflected a large portion into my eyes while falling back. I was hit by solid bulks. Things slid by me, scraping my arms and knocking against my head, and my hand was still clenched to the object in question. Sitting up, I brought my free hand to rub my face. I could not yet see as I stumbled up, spewing warm fluid between my teeth. I was dripping in it. I smeared it away from my eyes and blinked firmly to get the room into focus, but before I could muster the ability to see what lay around me, I first had to get over the taste. The safety of my mind was no longer available, as the taste once again confirmed what the substance was. As I was still young back then, I'd suffered many a bruise and a cut. I was no different to any other boy my age, aside from my infantile clinginess. Seeing your own blood put curiosity in a boy, learning of the world around him. I had of course sucked upon the cut on my finger before. I had always remembered the first time I had tasted that. Here it was again. In a volume I dare not dwell beyond this recollection. My room was rendered unrecognizable to me, as my sight betrayed what was left of my mental stability. Gore lay around me. It covered my feet. It gathered in every crevice of my floor. It hung from me like a garnish. My hair was splattered in varying consistencies, unable to close my eyes from the fear of the blood invading my sockets. I had no choice but to stare in sheer repulsion at hell on earth. Now that adrenaline was circling my system, I could see every speckle. For the first time, I could see what the larger obstructions had been within the once heaping mass. While splinters of bone were spread around me in a soup of internal organs, the heat of the concoction hit my nostrils as strips of rotting meat simmered in its unique recipe. I spotted a length of intestine coming from the rest of my foot on the desk. As my wide eyes jerked around the floor, they felt a heartbeat away from erupting from my head. An eyeball greeted my stare as it reached the rim of the doorway. I felt a pain from my arm. I looked down to my side. My hand was clasping the metal object so tightly that it was tearing at my skin. My artificial motions brought my hand up inches from my face. The trickling of blood from my damp hair left a terrible stream down the back of my neck. I tried to release my grip. Like vices, my fingers separated from the metal, leaving it rested on my palm, and I stared at it. I stared harder and even harder. It was a necklace made up of a chain. On the chain was a symbol. The symbol was a name. I looked up. Mom? Dad? In the dark of that room, I could swear to this day of one fact from all of its horror. Regardless of all the torment in my life that followed, the investigation, the therapy, the tear through my life that is never sealed, despite everything up to this point where I find myself now recalling this to you. I still remember the faintest, inaudible detail of that night. I heard a dark, deep voice whisper to me, perhaps within my own head. Its only words left a simple message to me, one that I can never seek redemption for. In that room, I heard the first and last time someone or something whisper to me, and me alone. Close enough for you?
There's not a lot of work out there for a 20-ish ex-security guard with a bad case of PTSD. And if that dumb kid was hideously scarred by a serial killer that had craved a swathe of victims across 3 states and disappeared without a trace, that kid can barely get a hamburger at McDonald's, much less gainful employment. My parents weren't able to help much. The wounds on my forehead and cheeks healed after a few weeks. Or months. I wasn't counting. You can still see them if you look closely, or in the moonlight. Nobody looks too closely these days. There's something about my eyes that seem to reflect the things that I've seen. I can identify with Winston. I've seen some shit. And that shit would turn you white, if not stark raving mad. I may be in fact mad, because I keep seeing shit. After the incident, I spent a few days in the hospital, and a few weeks in a psych ward. They assumed that I suffered a psychotic break due to the trauma or shock. And since my story did in fact sound like delusional ravings, off to the pretty pastel room I went. Life went on. The university reopened for classes on schedule, and the cops eventually stopped questioning me. I went home and sat on the couch for a few weeks, and gradually got the sense that my parents wanted me gone. I seemed to make them nervous. I seemed to make everyone nervous now. Tempers flared and words were said, and the next day, I was on the bus to somewhere. Anywhere. I had about 1,000 in my savings, plus my dad stashed away another few hundred in my bags, so that I would be able to rent cheap rooms and eat cheaper meals along my way. But I knew that I would need to find a job soon. I'd been traveling in a vaguely southern path, and finally ended up in a bus station in a town on the outskirts of Birmingham, crouched between the off-ramp to I-65 and a storage facility. I would say that it was an industrial district, but it seems that Birmingham is an entirely failed industrial district. The place had the charm of a 3-day dead whore, and smelt like one as well. Walking outside the bus station past the chain-link fence encircling the U-Store facility, I noticed a dingy yellowed hiring sign in the office window. What the hell, I thought, and pushed the dust-hazed door open and went inside. The manager's name was Al, but he looked nothing like my scrawny old ex-coworker. Al was a morbidly obese black man with a gap between his front teeth and a sheer t-shirt that looked as if it had been new in the 1980s. You got ID, you got no needle holes, and you don't stank like booze. You must be a fucking gift from God. You're hired. You start right now. You got a place to stay? No, sir. Good, that's better. You can stay in the apartment upstairs. I'll pay you $8 an hour for 40 hours a week. You work more than 40 hours a week? Pretend you're paying me rent. You're off Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you want health insurance, then call the fucking president, 'cause I ain't got mine yet neither. Al took me on a tour of the facility. U-Store was much bigger than it looked, consisting of 12 buildings arranged inside of a square security fence. Each building had 4 stories above ground and 2 more below ground. The lowest levels were premium rate and surprisingly heavily secured, with motion sensors and video cameras at every hallway intersection. The motion sensors are a pain in my dick. They go off if a fucking moth flies down the hall, but we still have to check the video and log it. The job was pretty much the same security job I was used to. Work an overnight shift from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., walk the perimeter twice, check the storage buildings once, pick up any trash, then go back and check the alarms and video. Log anything out of the ordinary and investigate as needed. Mostly, you just keep your mouth shut and let customers alone. They're paying our bills, so you don't need to know what they're fucking doing in their unit. Which may be, in fact, fucking. Al laughed. If a customer gets loud and makes a scene, or especially if they fuck up the facilities, you call the cops first, then me second. Al tapped on a metal storage unit wall, which echoed beamingly down the hallways. We were walking the security circuit, with Al pointing out each checkpoint. We'd reached the entrance to the high security section. When customers take the elevator, they gotta put their code in the elevator for it to show up. Then they gotta put in their code again to go down to B1 or B2. It really fucks them up. They'll get confused and panic inside the elevator. So you gotta keep your radio on at all times. They'll eventually see that intercom button and call you. You gotta explain to them that they gotta put in their code again. For us, it's the stairs, 'cause I hate those fucking elevators. Al swiped his badge and swung the heavy door open to the stairwell, and we walked through, and I froze. It was the same stairs. How could it be the same stairs? I stood there, hand locked in a death grip on the cold steel railing. Hey, are you okay? You having a heart attack or something? I blinked. It wasn't the same stairs. Not at all. These were new, shiny steel, brightly lit, and I could clearly see the bottom. No, sorry. I thought I had to sneeze and was just waiting for it. Yeah, fuck. All the fucking dust in here. Wait till spring. It's like fucking yellow snow all over. The high security area, or HS, was similar to the higher levels, but more brightly lit, and the units were larger so there was less of them. Wow, it's cold down here, I said. Yeah, we keep it at 50 year-round. We got law firms that keep their papers down here. And don't tell nobody, but we got government agencies doing the same. We keep it cool and dry, and their papers will stick around forever. We got customers that keep art down here, and antiques and shit like that. The doors to the HS area were big enough so that a car could fit through, and looked to be made of sturdier stuff than the flimsy sheet metal that the less expensive units were made of. Can people store their cars down here, Al? I asked. Nah, there's no way to get them down here. Building 3 has a ramp and a loading dock for cars, but most people don't want to store them in these buildings because regulations say you gotta drain them of oil and gas and any other fluids, which makes them a bitch to get into the units. Regulations say no explosives. Remember that, kid. If you see some dumbass storing his lawnmower with a gas can, you log it and you tell me. We continued touring the high security levels, B1 and B2. Al pointed out the security cameras at each intersection and at midpoints down the hallways, and showed me where the security route would take me. You don't always walk the same route. That'll drive you nuts. Mix it up some, but make sure you tag all those checkpoints, said Al. We made it back to the office, and Al took me upstairs to the small apartment. It was a little bigger than my dorm room in college, with a small kitchen, a shower, bed, closet, and a television set. Okay, kid, you better get some sleep. You're on shift at 9 o'clock. If you're late, or if I catch you sleeping, you're out on your ass. If you get people wanting to rent out a unit at 3 a.m., they're idiots trying to rob you. Tell them that the office is closed at night. Al squinted at me. You know how to work a gun? He asked. Yeah, my dad taught me. Is this that bad of an area? I asked. Aw, shit, nah, kid. You might need to show the gun to some tweakers, but that's about it. The glass is bulletproof, and those are solid steel doors. If some junkie's fucking with you in the office, there's a gun under the desk. It ain't loaded, but there's clips at the bottom of the drawer if you need them. He looked at me directly in the eyes. And if you need them, you don't need them. What you need to do is call me on the radio, which is what you'll do. What about inside the facility? I asked. You're inside of a highly secured, state-of-the-art storage facility, with radio and keys to nearly 1,000 steel doors. I bet you could figure something out, Al replied. He left. I took my duffel bag into my room and tried to get some sleep. The first night was uneventful. So was the next, and the next. Weeks passed and I began to feel better. I got into the swing of being a security guard again, which is mostly looking for differences. I recognized the patterns of the U-Store facility and its customers. The late night crowd is usually pretty quiet, except for Thursday night band practice. Some kids had gotten the bright idea to rent out one of the cheap ground-level units to store their musical instruments in, and they practiced every Thursday night. I didn't mind. They weren't that bad. About once a month, on a Wednesday night, there was a porn shot in one of the units. I wasn't very clear on what was going on until I mentioned it to Al the next day. A long black limo pulled up around 11 p.m. and several stripper-quality girls got out, followed by a few guys. They all trooped down to one of the larger high-security units, and they'd pack up and be gone before dawn. "We rent the units," Al said, "so as long as they're paying and not breaking the units, we don't say a word." Most of the customers weren't like that, though. They were regular people moving stuff around, up late because they had to work and couldn't move during the day. I saw guys fixing cars, women who would use large units as their extra closet for clothes, and a couple who were building a baby crib. They had a full woodworking setup in their unit, complete with dust suppression and built-in vacuums. But mostly it was people moving boxes of stuff in and out. Everything was going so well for maybe 6 weeks, and then I saw it. I saw her. I'd become accustomed to the false alerts and the motion sensing cameras, especially in Building 8, which was close to the highway, so I would suspect the sensors were falsing due to the road vibrations. Once or twice a night, usually in the long stretch of dark between 3 a.m. and dawn, I'd hear beeping from one of the many cameras on levels B1 or B2 in Building 8. I would put down my book, acknowledge the alert, write FA, false alert, in the logbook, and glance at the long, empty, brightly lit corridors and the monitors. It was early Wednesday morning, the beginning of my week, and I had been playing a game on my DS when the alerts went off. I sighed and put down my game. I reached for the logbook and noticed something in the monitors from the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw in the middle of the hallway a small shape. I leaned closer and hit the camera controls to switch to a closer view. Standing in the middle of a highly secured, brightly lit hallway, 2 floors underground, was a little girl in a bridal gown. "What the fuck?" I started to say, and the girl's head snapped towards the camera, her black eyes staring at me through the monitor, as if she heard me. She lifted a finger to her lips and ran off screen. I frantically thumbed through the camera views, but could see her nowhere. "Screw this," I muttered to myself. I grabbed my flashlight and the gun from the holster under the desk. I bolted out of the office door, pausing only to make sure it was locked. I started running down the paved alley leading to Building 8. At this point, I wasn't thinking of anything supernatural. I was thinking of the scumbags who made porn movies in my facility, and thinking that maybe the girl had escaped something awful, or was still involved in it. I called Al on the radio while I ran. "Al, wake up! We got an intruder in Building 8. Repeat, intruder in Building 8. Wake up!" Al lived nearby, within radio range. He mumbled something about being on his way. I badged the main door to Building 8 and flung it open. I ran across the stairwell. The panic, which hadn't returned since my first day, hit me like drowning in the ocean. I stopped, backed up, and shut the stairwell door. I didn't have time for this. I ran to the elevator and punched my override code, stepped inside and punched in my code again, and rode the slowest elevator in the world down to B2. The gently playing Muzak version of Shear's Believe did nothing to make the situation better. I cautiously stepped out into the corridor. I kept the gun in my jacket pocket, not wanting to spook anyone, especially with a kid involved. I walked down the hallway and found nothing. I turned at the end, down the next hallway. Still nothing. No locks out of place. No units were opened. No sounds. No smells. Nothing. I checked the stairwell and found nothing. I gritted my teeth and walked up the stairs to the B1 landing, looked out the door, and found nothing. By this point, I was hoping I would find something. A shoe. A body Hell, a whole murder scene. But there was nothing. My radio crackled. I jumped and bit my tongue. I said, "Where are you?" Al's voice grumbled over the radio. "B2, in Building 8, South Stairwell," I said. "Found anything?" Al asked. "Not a thing. Sorry, man. It was probably a false alert." "Hey, it happens. Just once, though. Meet you back at the office. We'll check the tapes." "Roger, roger," I said into the radio. I sighed. I walked down the long hallway to the elevator. I checked the remaining hallways and retraced my steps to the elevator. I punched in my code. As the elevator doors closed, I thought I heard a sound. A girlish giggle. "God damn it," I said. I punched the cancel button, and the elevator doors slid open, and I stepped out. I quickly looked both ways. There, to my left, was a gauzy white shape that disappeared around the corner. Another giggle. I looked up at the security camera and pointed at it. Then I pointed in the direction of the corner, holding my flashlight like a club. I jogged over to the corner and quickly checked both ways. Nothing, of course. I ran as fast as I could down the next corridor and to its end, turned and saw nothing. I ran to the next intersection. Nothing. Then to the next intersection. Nothing. Finally, wheezing out of breath, I yelled, "Okay, you bastards, I give up. Enough from you for tonight." Al was at the desk when I got back. "Enjoy your exercise, kid?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm trying out for the Olympics," I replied. "Maybe the Special Olympics. I just watched you run 2 miles inside Building 8 for no fucking good reason," Al said. "Figures. So you saw nothing on any of the cameras?" "Not a thing." Al made me sit through repeated viewings of the security footage. He made it a point to show me by pointing at the camera from all angles. Each camera showed the bright, empty hallways. "Are you sure you're not on anything, man?" Al asked. "I swear I saw something," I said. "Chill, man. This is me fucking with you. I believe you. It gets late here, and you see shit. Stare at those screens long enough, not seeing anything, your mind will start making up shit because it's bored. I've seen shit too," Al said. "Yeah? Like what?" Al shifted in his seat. "I've never seen a girl. I saw a dude walking down the hallway once. Normal looking dude, walking around like he was a customer. But that console there shows the door accesses. And it hadn't gone off in a while. I thought maybe it was some asshole trying to live in one of the units, which is against regulations. It happens sometimes. I checked it out, and there was nobody there." Al reached into the microfridge under the desk and pulled out one of his favorite lime sodas. "That wasn't the worst, though," he said, cracking open the can. "I saw blood once. A whole lot. Splashed around all over the damn place. I used to take those damn elevators. And one time, ding, the door opens and..." He took a deep swig of his drink. "I just stood there. The door closed. I put in my code to open it again, and all the blood was gone. I know it wasn't real. I'd been working for 20 hours straight that night. I just figure something doesn't want me riding those elevators, so I don't." It got worse after that night. I can't help but think that my pursuit and my taunts woke something up, or maybe something recognized me. Afterwards, I had company every night. The still, sterile mood of the facility from before had changed. It was like something was lying in wait. When I made my rounds, I would hear footsteps behind me or down adjacent hallways. I heard faint voices as well, muttering and whispering from behind the cold, still doors of the storage units. The upper units were the worst, because they weren't brightly lit all the time like the high security units were. The upper level lights were motion sensitive and were on timers. They would turn on as soon as you entered a hallway, then turn off when you left. Several times during my rounds, those lights would flick on at the opposite end of a long corridor, only to flick off again after a few seconds. One night during my first round, I was walking the dim asphalt paths between buildings. I turned the corner, and standing there before me was a girl. I jumped back in shock. The girl uttered a short squeak and stopped. "You scared the hell out of me, you asshole," she yelled. "Aren't you supposed to be using that flashlight?" "Sorry, it ruins my night vision," I said. "I didn't mean to startle you. I wasn't expecting to see anyone out here." I recognized her. Her name was Jin. She was the bassist for the band that practiced in one of the units. She had long, straight black hair, and several piercings that glittered in the moonlight. "I was on my way to your office," Jin said, "so I'm kinda glad I ran into you. I'm sorry I snapped at you earlier, it's just, I can't find Lewis anywhere. Lewis was the gorgeous and talented singer for the band, and to my deepest regret, was her boyfriend. We had a fight and he stormed off like the chicken shit that he is. I can't find him now." We walked back to the building that housed her band's unit. "If he's in the facility, he couldn't have gone far. Your access code will get him into the main level of this building, but he can't go anywhere else from there. The elevator takes a code that he doesn't have, and the stairwell doors are locked as well," I said. The other band members were in their storage unit rolling up cables and packing their gear. "Did you find him?" asked the short, stocky drummer. "No," I said. "How long has he been gone?" "About an hour now," replied the drummer. "I tried calling him, but I get shit for signal in here." "Not like he'd answer anyway," said a tall, skinny kid who was packing away a guitar. He looked at me and said, "Wow, that's a cool tribal, man," pointing at the scars on my face. "It's not a tattoo," I said, not wanting to get into a meet the freak with the customers. "Will you guys focus?" Jin said. "You guys stay here in case he comes back. I'll sweep this floor, and if I don't find him, I'll check the video back at the office." I left. I checked the entirety of the ground level, and for good measure, I checked the upper floors as well, knowing that there was no way he could get up there. I went back to the band storage unit. "Did you see anything?" Jin asked. "No, and he's obviously not back here. I'll go check the videos." The band members decided to go home, except for Jin, who insisted upon going through the video footage with me. "Look, there he is," she said. The monitor showed Lewis leaving his storage building right after Jin said he had stormed off. Lewis stood by the door, smoking for a few minutes. He then turned his head sharply to the right, as if he heard something. He then threw down his cigarette and walked down the asphalt path, out of view of the camera. "Where'd he go? Quick, find him on another screen," Jin said, rubbing her hands on her leggings. I went through the video feeds, and I found Lewis again. Walking down the path, he stopped and looked around, then turned again and started walking. I switched the feeds again. I found him walking towards Building 8. "Aren't those doors supposed to be closed all the time?" Jin asked, pointing at a dark spot on the gray and white screen. "Yes," I replied, as Lewis paused before the opening to Building 8 and stepped inside. I toggled through the feeds again until I found one for Building 8. I could only see his silhouette as he walked down the hallway, pausing occasionally to look around. He then pulled open the heavy, magnetically locked security door to the stairwell. He stepped inside and pulled the door closed behind him. "Shit, that's bad," I said. "Those doors are magnetically locked. They can't open unless you have a badge and a code," I said. Jin shook her head. "It sure as hell opened, though. You saw it." I switched the camera feed again, catching a glimpse of Lewis in the stairwell. I switched again, and saw him walking down a bright corridor of the B2 level, toward the camera. He walked up to an open storage unit. The door was rolled up and yawning open, like the black eye socket of a dead thing. I saw the pale blob of Lewis's face glance up at the camera, then whip back to face the darkened doorway. His eyes widened. His mouth opened into a silent scream. His figure jerked forward into the storage unit. The heavy door rolled down and slammed shut, leaving the camera staring blandly at the pristinely empty hallway. Jin stared at the screen, mouth slightly open, eyes wide and bulging, ringed in the black of shock that no amount of makeup can match or mask. "Go get him." She grabbed my shoulder, with hands made musician strong, and squeezed hard. "Go get him now." I grabbed the pistol from its holster and dug 2 clips out of the bottom of the drawer. I got on the radio. "Al, come in. We got a problem. Wake up, Al." I shouted into the radio as I ran. The radio screeched static and white noise. "Al, I need you at work. Big trouble." The radio hissed and popped, and abruptly turned off. The night seemed alive as I ran to Building 8. The trees outside the facility swayed in a brisk wind, their leaves clattering like faint mocking laughter. I felt eyes on me and the sense of things around every corner, waiting. My scars began to lightly itch, as if I had run through cobwebs. I reached Building 8 to find the door tightly shut and locked. As I used my badge to open it, I heard scraping noises coming from behind me. I turned, hand on the pistol, to see Jen. "Is that blood?" she asked, pointing at a small spatter of spots on the floor just inside the door. I tapped on a spot with my shoe, smearing it. "It's too dark to tell from here. It could be oil or something like that. Look, you shouldn't be in here. Go back to the office until I get back." "No way. I saw the tape. I saw what happened to Lewis. I'm going to get him, and you're going to help me. Now." She pushed past me and walked down the hall towards the elevators. "Help me get this open." I opened the elevator, and we stepped inside. I thumbed the security code and pressed the button for B2. "Stay behind me," I said, drawing the pistol. I had no idea what I was doing, but I've played enough video games to know that the monster jumps out after the elevator doors open. I heard a faint click and looked over to see Jen holding a small handgun. "My dad got this for me last year. He was nervous about me hanging out downtown. He took me to the shooting range for a few months." She passed a shaky hand over her face and through her hair. "Why the fuck is this happening? And what the fuck is happening? And why aren't you scared?" I snorted. "I'm terrified. I just peed myself a little back there in case you didn't notice." The elevator chimed and the doors opened. As for what's happening, I don't know. I have an idea though, and I don't think it's good. I stepped into the corridor, checking both directions. The long white hallways were bright and quiet. I slowly walked down the hallway towards the storage unit, where we had seen Lewis. At the corner, I saw a reddish-brown smear, a fingerprint or a thumbprint, as if someone had paused here and touched the wall for support. Jin stared at it for a moment, but said nothing. I turned and continued down the hallway. There was a small spattering of blood on the floor in front of the storage unit. "It's padlocked," I said. "There's no way he could have gotten in there, shut the door, and locked it from the outside." Suddenly, my scars began to itch and throb deeply, like acid on my face. I drew in a breath, and the lights went out. Jin screamed. I heard a pop and a click and a clatter, and the lights came back on. The padlock was now laying on the floor in front of the storage unit. The bright, surreal white fluorescence at the far end of the hallway went dark. Then the next set turned off, and the next, the darkness growing closer to us in sections. A whispering and muttering sound filled the air. We unconsciously moved closer together, and back towards the metal door of the storage unit. The lights went out again, and the darkness rushed in like some eager fluid. Jin and I stood in the whispering dark, pressed together like orphan children lost in an abysmal woods for an untold amount of time, until the red emergency lights flickered on. Their blood-red glow did not so much as illuminate as it did extenuate the shadows that pooled and swirled around us. The whispering grew louder and louder, like a river of mumbling, tumbling voices, until it reached a roaring crescendo, and then stopped. The storage unit's door slowly rolled open. Lewis was there, sitting on the floor. He was facing away from us, crouched and still. "Lewis!" Jin exclaimed, and tried to run forward, but I grabbed her by the arm. Lewis spoke, his voice somehow horrible, drifting up and rattling around the steel walls. "They made me come here. They want people to know. They made me see. I didn't want to see, but they made me." My eyes slowly adjusting to the light, I began to make out shapes in the storage unit, stacked against the walls. Lewis's arm reached out to the nearest shrouded shape and pulled. It thumbled to the concrete floor, making a horrible dry husking sound as it hit. A desiccated, shriveled arm fell out of the shroud. Lewis stood up and started to laugh. He turned his mangled face towards us. He stared at us with deep black gouged-out sockets where his eyes had once been. They showed me. They made me see. But I don't have to see anymore. Jin shrieked and recoiled into the hallway. I had the gun trained on Lewis, its grip sleek in my shaky hands. The whispering was back, rattling the steel walls and doors. With a sickening lurch, I realized that all the unit's doors were sliding up, and their neatly stacked contents were falling, sliding, and tumbling to the floor. The sickly sweet stench of decay that the state-of-the-art ventilation systems had masked so well before was now overpowering, filling the air. Bodies! They're all full of bodies! Jin screamed, hands on the side of her face, eyes huge and shining in the red light, wrenching her black hair, gun forgotten on the floor. I grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her once. "Run!" I shouted. I dragged her away from the bodies, down the corridor, trying desperately not to hear Lewis's mad laughter. I tripped over a smaller corpse sprawled out in front of the unit near the corner. I slammed into the opposite wall. I looked down for a moment and saw a white bridal veil covering a small child's withered corpse. I shook my head and staggered to the stairwell. The whispering was now a full roar, rage-filled voices howling, shaking the security door. I fumbled with my badge twice, but I finally got it. I punched in my code and hauled open the door. I grabbed Jin by the arm and dragged her up the stairs. The lights in the stairwell were all wrong. I realized my face was wet as I reached the B1 landing. There was not much of a ground-level landing left. As Jin and I crawled out of the stairwell, we saw that most of the U-Store facility was gone. A few portions of building were still standing, but we were otherwise in a field of desolation and destruction. Later, I learned that though tornadoes were common for that area, the one that leveled the U-Store facility was uncommon in both its fury and its brevity. NOAA reported a small, high-intensity cell that appeared directly above the facility at about 6:30 a.m., spawning a slow-moving tornado that was rated as an F3. The tornado encompassed the storage facility and stayed effectively in the same spot for a full 15 minutes, until moving in a generally northeast direction for about a mile. It appeared to have left the ground for most of its travel, touching down again in a neighborhood to the northeast of U-Store, before dissipating completely by 7 a.m. They found Al's body, or the remains of it, in the top of a tree 2 counties over, 3 days later. The coroner's report stated that Al had died of heart failure. It appears he had a massive heart attack before the tornado got him. Officially, the U-Store facility was being used for the illegal storage of corpses that were to have been cremated or buried by certain unnamed funeral homes. The fact that those funeral homes were never officially named, and the case was quickly filed away in the darkest, dustiest cabinet available to the Birmingham Police Department, this incident did not make the news. Of course, the scariest part about this whole situation seemed to be that the way even a freak tornado revealed thousands of unidentified corpses stacked like cordwood inside of a absurdly well-secured, well-cooled storage facility in a relatively large city, people just seemed to forget about it, as if they wanted to forget, or didn't even want to know. I didn't see Jen again afterwards. The cops were initially very interested in me, as I was apparently the only living employee of U-Store Incorporated that they could locate. They kept me in jail for nearly a week without pressing charges before I started making noises about attorneys. For the first few days, I was completely fine with being behind bars. Those bars would keep things out. I overheard them say something about Jen being committed to a psychiatric ward due to her story and her insistence that her boyfriend was trying to kill her. She had become violent and attacked one of the officers questioning her. Lewis was never found, and neither was his body. The other thing that I overheard, the thing that made me decide to leave the jail, was about the U-Store owners. It seems that there weren't any. The whole operation was owned by shell companies, and the cops couldn't track down the original owners. Eventually, they stopped looking. I knew that somewhere, Some person or some group of people arranged to have that storage facility built, and to have it equipped for a specialized purpose. I knew that someone had to be responsible for those bodies being there, and I suspect that someone was responsible for those bodies being dead in the first place. Thousands of people disappear in this country each year. I may have found some of them. What keeps me awake at night more than the dreams or the sounds outside my window or the itching of my scars is wondering how many more storage facilities are out there.
I'd never been too fond of anyone at my local school. They were all a little too rude or boring for me. You see, I grew up in a small area with not many people interested in art like I am. So I had to venture off from home and found myself attending a pretty rural art college. It's sort of like a normal university, except it's full of big-headed people. Now, the only reason why I'm here is because I've always wanted to be an illustrator, a children's book designer of sorts. I'd always taken keen interest in children's media and classic books such as the Arthur series. So when I was sent to live at this college, I was taken back when I realized a lot of the other students here were all fine artists. You know the kind. The ones who like to splatter paint onto a canvas and claim it's art. I'm not really big on that sort of thing, but I didn't question it. I settled into the new place pretty quickly. I was sharing a dorm with a few other students. There was myself, a graphics designer named Josh, a film animator called Lily, and then there was one more guy called Daniel. Daniel was one of those fine artists I just described to you. His room was decorated with photographs of distorted women, and he always had weird music playing too. It was sort of like trippy 60s music. He always liked to smoke, so his room always smelt like an old ashtray. It was pretty gross, but he was a nice enough guy, and we all got along pretty well. We soon became a tightly packed group of friends. It was the start of a new term for us all, and we all came back from home after spending the summer there. We all unpacked our things and started talking about what we had done over the summer. I went hiking with my stepdad. We went on one of those summer camps, replied Josh. I spent most of my time with my girlfriend. We watched films and went to watch some plays too, Lily said. She spent a lot of time whining about missing her sporty girlfriend, but we were glad they got some time together. I hadn't really done much worth mentioning. I did the usual stuff. I went out to parties and went on trips with my family. Nothing really that special. I was just about to pipe up and speak when I got interrupted. I spent my time at the dentist, we heard Daniel say. My father is a doctor of sorts, so he let me come with him sometimes and explore the hospital. My favorite place to visit was the dentistry. I got to touch and feel teeth. It was cool. We all stared at him a bit confused. Were you even allowed to have a random stranger go into hospital rooms? Let alone play with the equipment? We didn't really care. We knew Daniel was that sort of guy anyways. He was known for getting into trouble for the sake of his art. That was always his excuse. We all spent our first couple of days getting to grips with our assignments. We all found out what we had to do. Naturally, I had to study some illustrators and just mimic their styles. Josh spent some money on a new Mac to do some more design tests, and Lily had to start playing about with claymation. It was a pretty nice vibe when we all be at our dorms, talking and giving ideas. Well, at least it was nice until Daniel would start insulting us. He'd never been the same since he came back from the summer break. He seemed more cold and distant. We assumed something must have happened to him over the break, so we decided not to press him on it. He never told us anything about his projects. In fact, he never even told us what the subject was. It was pretty normal for Daniel to be reserved, but never this much. At nights, he'd just make himself some dinner and then shut himself in his room, crank up the music, and not be seen until the next morning. The rest of us would go out places, like going bowling or down to a local gig. Daniel used to happily tag along, but not anymore. One night, myself and Josh had gone out for a long night. Lily didn't come with us. She said she wanted to see if Daniel was okay, since he hadn't been talking to us for a few days now. We could see her point and complied. She had spent the evening knocking on his door and trying to get him to speak with her. Just before we left, we saw his door and Lily step inside before it was locked again. Brushing it off, we head out. We'd gone to see a movie and then go out for a few innocent drinks. It was fun, but we didn't get home till around 2 a.m. When we got back, Josh just said goodnight and went straight to bed. I hadn't gone to bed yet. I was pretty damn hungry. Drinking always made me hungry, so I raided our fridge and found some cold pizza from the night before. I was going to go back into my room when I realized something I didn't notice before. Daniel wasn't in his room, and Lily wasn't in hers. Due to Daniel's strange new behavior of locking himself in his room until early hours, and Lily never went anywhere without texting us, this was pretty weird. I went over to his door and gave it a knock, and sure enough, the door just opened right up. It wasn't locked or anything. I just assumed he and her had gone out with some of his Ponzi art friends, but it wasn't like Daniel to leave his door open like this. I've always been a nosy son of a bitch, so I stepped inside to see if there were any signs that he had gone somewhere. His keys were gone. His jacket was gone too, but he left his wallet on the desk. The other thing that was odd was that he'd left his laptop on his bed, and it was still on. The screen was still lighting up. Curiosity got the best of me. Perhaps this could be my chance to find out about this art project he'd been hiding. I mean, Daniel was a fine artist, so it could have been anything. I noticed that he had a USB plugged in and 2 files on the screen. One was called Dentist Photos, and the other file was a singular image named Teeth.JPG. I clicked on the Dentist Photos file, and there was just pictures of people's teeth and plastic models of teeth. It was nothing interesting. I clicked back off the file and decided to check out Teeth.JPG. The image would forever be burned into my brain. It startled me so bad that I slammed the laptop shut, shaking as I sat back. I wasn't sure if I wanted to lift the screen again, but I knew I had to, or Daniel would know someone touched his laptop. I lifted the screen again, staring at the image for a brief moment before clicking away from it nervously. I then made a decision. I needed to show this to Josh and Lily in the morning. This was seriously messed up. I mean, I knew that Daniel was an artistic kind of guy, but this was just insane. I quickly bolted it back to my own room and scoured for my USB drive. I eventually found it and darted back to Daniel's laptop, where I copied the image onto my USB. I stared at the image for a little while longer, I was trying to dismiss the image as a mere photo manipulation, but there was just something so wrong about it. Perhaps it was the black, soulless eyes, or the fact that whoever or whatever this creature was pulling up its mouth in such a weird and disturbing way. It almost looked forced. Like whoever this creature was forced to pose in this way. I shook it off as a mere thought and fixed up the laptop so it didn't look tampered with before I went back to my own room. Soon enough, I heard our front door open, then the sound of footsteps, then Daniel's door locking. Daniel was back home, but there were no signs of Lily. The next morning, I waited until Daniel had gone out for one of his lectures, and since it was Friday, Josh and I had the morning off. I decided now would be a good time to show Josh the image. I asked him if he wanted to see what Daniel had been hiding from us, and he confusedly, but also eagerly said yes. I brought my laptop into the living room and loaded up my USB and opened the image for both of us to see. Josh's expression fell into shock before he spluttered. "What the fuck is that thing?" I could tell by his reaction that both of us were thinking the same thing. This couldn't have been an art project. There's no way that this would pass as a fine arts piece. Would it? I mean, sure, art can be creepy at times. I can't imagine his teachers would appreciate such a creepy and disgusting image. I know that Daniel can be a creepy son of a bitch, but that isn't right. We've got to show Lily that... We both cut off one another. We paused briefly before looking at one another with confusion. Where was Lily? I realized that she hadn't come back with Daniel last night, and neither of us had seen her that morning. When I explained to Josh what I did last night, he began to worry. Lily was never the kind to just sneak off and not tell anyone. I picked up my phone and began to ring her mobile. For a while, there was silence. Then, just from Lily's room, we heard a faint buzzing sound. Josh got up and walked into Lily's room rather quickly. He'd never been one to go into girls' rooms, and came back out holding Lily's phone in his hand with a worried look on his face. Lily was gone, and we had no way to get a hold of her. Maybe she'd just gone to a lecture and forgot her phone, I stuttered. Josh shook his head, chewing on his lip out of nerves. No, Lily doesn't have lectures on Friday, remember? She'd normally at least say hello to us and take her phone. We know she lives on that thing. She never stops texting her girlfriend. He was right. Lily's life revolved around her phone, so we knew there would be no way she'd leave it. Suddenly, her phone lit up. Someone was calling her. We both looked at the phone, then back at one another, before Josh passed the phone to me. I brought it to my ear before speaking. Hello? On the other end of the line, I realized it was her girlfriend that was calling. I recognized her husky voice. "Oh, Lily, there you are. Thank God you're okay. You didn't text me at all last night or this morning. I thought something was wrong." I cringed a little bit, realizing I had to break it to her that I wasn't Lily. As I spoke, I heard her girlfriend begin to get upset. She, breathing quite heavily, and I could hear the sniffling sound someone makes when they cry. I felt so bad for her, but perhaps she could be my chance to find out anything I could about Lily. Where is Lily? She hasn't spoken to me since last night. I thought she was just playing a joke on me, but now I don't know. I looked at Josh with a confused stare as he began to pace around a little bit. I put the phone on loudspeaker and asked her, "Why do you think Lily was playing a joke on you? Did she say anything odd?" "Yes," her girlfriend replied. "She sent me one message around 1:30 a.m. I looked at Josh, baffled, before I asked again. "What did the message say?" "Help me." I looked at Josh with wide and worried eyes. Lily would never pull a prank like that on anyone, let alone her own girlfriend. She always told us how worried she'd be about her girlfriend getting paranoid, so we knew she wouldn't send a message like that unless she had a reason. I continued to speak with her girlfriend, but I was getting nowhere, so I reassured her that we'd know where Lily was and she'd be calling her back tonight. Her girlfriend seemed suspicious, but just agreed and put the phone down. Myself and Josh paced back and forth. We had no idea what this could mean. Why would Lily send a message like that? We continued to think for a while, and decided until we knew where Lily was, we were going to skip our lectures. We spent a long time thinking over things, and began to write down the connections we could make. Afterwards, Josh read out the list to me so I could think them over. First, Lily goes into Daniel's room around 10 p.m. She's locked in his room. Then, we return at 2 a.m. During that time, at around 1:30, we find out that Lily texted her girlfriend with a message saying, "Help me." You discover that neither Lily or Daniel are home yet. Daniel's door is unlocked and his laptop is still left on. We find the image and then leave. You then return to your room and heard Daniel come home, but not Lily. Lily is still not back home yet, but Daniel is. What the hell could all this mean? I thought it over for a while, and then came to a conclusion. I didn't want to make this connection, but it's the only connection I could salvage. Daniel did something to Lily. We have to confront Daniel tonight if Lily doesn't come home between now and tonight, okay? Josh looked shocked, but he agreed. Daniel would be our only chance of finding out what happened to Lily. Later that night, there were still no signs of Lily. We knew that her girlfriend would be calling soon, so we decided to turn the phone off. We didn't want to try and reassure her with false information. We waited until 6 p.m. before Daniel finally came home. He looked rather startled to see both of us standing there in the living room, and he lightly placed his art folder and satchel down against the sofa as we both stood up. Josh spoke to him, and I could tell he was trying to keep his composure. "Daniel, we'd like to have a talk. It's about Lily?" Daniel's eyes seemed widened ever so slightly, but nothing I thought was worth thinking over. He tilted his head at us, looking confused as he asked us, "Why? Is something wrong?" I shook my head. I didn't want him to think we were accusing him of anything. We would never get any answers out of him if we just straight up accused him like that. Daniel seemed to look a little on edge, looking away from us as he itched his wrist under his baggy gray jumper. He pushed his rather dark black bangs out of his face as he spoke. "Then what's wrong? Is she okay? I mean, I know she left her phone here last night, so I suppose there wouldn't be any way to getting hold of her." We didn't say anything. We weren't too sure on what to say to him. How were we supposed to ask him if he did anything to Lily without him taking offense? I then realized something. It'd taken me a moment to realize it before I spoke. you just said she left her phone here last night, right? How the hell did you know that? I could see Josh's eyes light up. He just realized the same thing I did. How on earth did Daniel know she left her phone behind, unless they went somewhere? We already acknowledged the fact that Lily never leaves her phone anywhere. So how on earth did he know she left it behind? Daniel didn't answer us. He was silent for a while before he pushed past us and walked into his room, slamming the door shut. We walked over to his door, banging on it harshly before he shouted, "Leave me alone. I have coursework to do. I'm sure Lily will show up tonight. Just stop being so paranoid." We just didn't know what to do. Daniel clearly knew way more than he let on, but there was no way we were going to get that out of him. We walked back into the living room and slumped back down. I ran a hand through my hair. What the hell was going on? I then realized that Daniel had left his bags on the sofa. He must have been too flustered to pick them up when he stomped into his room. I peered around to Daniel's door, hearing no sound of him leaving his room yet. I knew soon enough he would be coming out to get his bags. In a moment of madness, I picked up the satchel and emptied its contents onto the coffee table. I could see Josh's eyes widen before he whispered to me frantically, "What the hell are you doing? What if he sees you?" I didn't care. I needed to know anything I could about Lily. She was a roommate, but also a best friend. I couldn't just leave this to solve itself. I pushed through documents and came across what looked like a ticket. I crumpled it up and pushed it in my pocket. Then I found a zip-up document bag. I pushed it into Josh's hands and told him to go hide it. He complied and went and hid it in his room. I then quickly put all the other stuff back into Daniel's bag and rested it right up like it looked before. I then got up and walked into Josh's room. I watched Daniel go back to the living room and pick up his bags before he walked back into his room again. Josh grabbed the zip-up file from under his pillow as we both sat down on his bed. We didn't say anything. We just read the cover of the file. Teeth. It sent chills up my spine. I knew that whatever was inside would have a connection to the image I found on the computer. But what we saw was nothing we expected. It was a series of photographs. The first photo was a picture of what looked like an abandoned room of sorts. The walls were covered in old Flora wallpaper, and the floor was just damp wood. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. Then, the next photo was just pictures of tools and plastic tools. We then noticed that the tools were linked to dentistry. You know, like needles and drills. It was pretty creepy, but it was the next photos that made us both drain of color. It was just photos of Lily smiling. We flipped through every single photo of Lily, and in each one she had her big toothy smile. Such a sweet smile. One of her most distinct features was her large front tooth. Just her left one. We always found it cute, but now it was no laughing matter. We noticed on the back of the photographs there were labels, and each tooth on each photo was marked. There were notes on the photos that said things like remove or replace. It knocked Josh sick, and I was more terrified now than ever. We knew that we couldn't confront Daniel about these photos. It would get us nowhere. We just sat in silence for a long time, staring at the photos with disbelief. I then remembered the ticket I found and stuffed in my pocket. I reached into my pocket with a shaky hand and pulled it out, bringing it to my vision. It read, Group Ticket 2. Location, Station Road. Time date, September 28th, 2011. 11:34 p.m. We both looked at each other with firm gazes. That was just yesterday evening. We knew exactly what we had to do now. We had to find where Lily was. We never saw Daniel for the rest of the evening, and Josh had become incredibly paranoid. He asked if he could sleep in my room tonight. Although I thought it was a bit awkward, I didn't mind. I mean, he was scared real bad, so I didn't want to leave him alone like that. When Josh was sleeping, I printed off the disturbing image for referencing. Then I had spent most of the night planning for the next day. I had already emailed our lecturers letting them know we weren't going to show up because we felt sick, and I checked how far away Station Road was. To my surprise, it was only an hour's drive. So I figured we could take Josh's car up to Station Road and figure out the location where Daniel and Lily have been from there. The whole time, I kept staring at the Teeth.JPG image. A horrible thought crept into my mind. I didn't want to think about it, but it could have been a possibility. Was the person in the picture Lily? Every time I thought about it, I'd shake it off, telling myself I was just paranoid. But it would all add up. The timing, the photographs. It would all make sense. I didn't want to believe it, and I certainly wasn't going to until we found Lily. The next morning, myself and Josh got up around 6 a.m. We wanted to be out of the dorm before Daniel woke up, and we made sure to lock our own doors. We also decided to take Lily's phone with us. We didn't want to leave anything behind that would indicate we were suspicious. We left the dorm and got into Josh's car. I had brought along a small bag full of different things such as the photographs, a flashlight, a camera, and a notepad with a pen. We loaded ourselves into the car and made our way towards Station Road. We were able to pinpoint it with my mobile GPS. When we got there, we found that we were in a rather abandoned-looking area of town. The place was practically deserted. All we could see were tall, crumbling buildings and little empty houses. We'd taken out the photo of the room and began to walk up to each little house. We pressed our faces to the glass to see if we could make out the floral wallpaper like the room in the photograph. We spent a good few hours doing this. Nothing. We were getting pretty angry at this point. We just wanted to get Lily back. Josh got so angry, he walked up to one of the house walls, kicking it harshly as he shouted from the top of his lungs, "Daniel, you sick bastard!" Just as he kicked the wall one last time, we noticed the wall began to tear, like paper. Josh looked down at his foot and realized he had tore what looked like a piece of painted paper away from the stone wall. He then began to rip away the remaining pieces of paper, only to reveal what looked like an outdoor basement. The doors were rustic and scratched, but we noticed that the metallic handle was clean, as if it had been tampered with. Josh looked over his shoulder to me, and I gave him a nod. I quickly took a photo of the layout of this basement-like thing. Josh then walked down to the doors and gave them a push. And to both of our surprise, the doors were simply blocked by a plank of wood, which Josh was able to push away with ease. We then pushed open the doors slowly and cautiously. Who knows what could be kept in here? It was obviously hidden for some reason. If only we knew what was coming, perhaps it would have saved us both from throwing up. As we stepped inside, we were met with a rancid odor. Neither of us knew what the smell was, but we know it made us both feel instantly sick. Josh gagged and coughed, covering his face with his shirt. I swallowed back vomit as I continued to walk. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it inside the pitch-black stone room. I continued to walk, and we heard nothing. As we walked further into the room, the smell only thickened. It was getting so bad that Josh threw up behind me. He quickly composed himself and stumbled back upright before we continued. As I looked around the room, my eyes met with something on the floor that made my heart race and the flashlight drop from my grasp. It was Lily's knitted sweater. It was the same sweater she always wore when she went out for pizza or to go bowling. It was the same gray sweater with the same little torn threads on her sleeves where she would chew on it. I could see Josh from the corner of my eye, his eyes just as wide as mine as all the last of color drained from his face. I picked up the sweater slowly, holding it up in front of me when I noticed there was a large and thick blood stain soaking all the way through the jumper. It started thick from the collar and became thinner as it went down the sweater. I was now the one to throw up. I collapsed onto my knees, puking heavily. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what to think. I soon maintained myself and stood up again, holding the flashlight as I put the sweater in my bag. Through blurred, teary eyes I pressed on. I found nothing from where I was standing and heard a small light switch flicker on from behind me as a red light filled the corner of the room. And then I heard him. Josh screamed louder than anything I had ever heard before. My stomach was in knots as I shined my light to where he was standing. He was standing over a large black table. I watched him just stand there in complete terror, as if he was frozen. I could only imagine what he was looking at, and I truly wished I'd left it to my imagination. I walked over to his side. There I laid my eyes on the sight before me. It was Lily. She was strapped down onto a table, wearing nothing but her jeans. Her body was covered in thick layers of tape, keeping her strapped down. One of her arms dangled down to one of her sides, but the other arm was nowhere to be seen. In replacement was just a taped-up stub with stains of blood under it. I could hardly breathe. My stomach was so knotted and my breath so tight all I could do was stare. I looked up at Lily's face. Her head had been forced back, and we could see that her innocent eyes had been violently gouged out, and in replacement was thick black wax that filled up the empty eye sockets. Her nose had been contorted and broken, snapped in many places. But the worst part of it all was her mouth. Her jaw had been forced open, and we could see her mouth had also been filled with the same black wax. Her teeth had been ripped out and misplaced in all different directions. I then noticed how her mouth had been stretched upright, her cheek tearing to reveal more teeth that had been pulled out from her mouth. It gave her a contorted, horrible smile. Her face was covered in streams of her own dried-up blood. I stared at the hand that was holding the mouth open. It was her own. Her own hand had been stitched to the ripped cheek. The flesh was torn and falling apart under her nails. Her nails were cracked and chipped, with staples and little threads holding the hand in place. The red fluorescent light created horrific shadows and highlighted every grotesque feature that now was on Lily's face. I silently and numbly pulled out the picture of Teeth.JPG and stared at it, then back to the real thing. They were identical. Josh brought a shaky hand over Lily's cheek before he collapsed by the side of the table. I could hear him sobbing horrendously by her side before he passed out beside me. I too felt like I was on the brink of collapsing, but something caught my attention. I could feel the presence of someone else coming into the room, but I already knew who it was. I knew now there was nothing we could do about it. I heard the door slam shut and the plank of wood being placed over the door. I heard the sound of footsteps. I heard them inch closer and closer until I could feel their presence behind me. I knew he was there, and I knew that there was no way out. I heard their voice speak very faintly behind me. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it's okay. It's all for the sake of art. But that wasn't what made me collapse. I knew well enough from here that my fate was sealed, but after he finished speaking, I heard one more tiny sound that made my heart both ache and my tears only stream further down my numb cheeks. Before my vision faded away from me and my hands slip away from the table, I could hear Lily choking.
In autumn of 2003, my first year studying at Cambridge University, a rumor began circulating about a VHS tape that was causing students to go insane. Nobody knew who had first found the tape, or where they had found it, but the stories began in October, when a history student allegedly stopped talking altogether after viewing it. Her roommate claims that she came into the dorm room one evening to find her sitting on her bed, pointing at the VHS player, her eyes wide and her lips stretched into an unnatural smile. When the girl didn't respond to her even after half an hour, the roommate was sufficiently unnerved to call the police. The history student had apparently suffered intense mental trauma and had lost her ability to speak. Following this incident, the tape was passed around among students. I never actually knew the history student or the roommate who found the tape. Actually, I never heard of the incident reported in any official newspapers either. But I have a feeling the tape was real. I heard the stories, and I knew other people who had watched it. Well, some of it, at least. Those who watched it always gave the same description of what was on it. The tape contained a video that was about an hour long. The footage would begin inside a dimly lit room, perhaps a cellar. It showed a man sitting on a wooden chair in the center of the room, facing away from the camera, so that you could only see his back and the back of his head, which was covered by a hood. He appeared to be wearing dark robes, like a priest, and looked thin and frail. A mirror was placed against the wall he was facing, and angled so that his face could be seen in the video. It was an old man's face, perhaps around 70 years old, and it wore a coldly serious expression. Quite a few people turned it off at this point, claiming it already made them feel uneasy. The recording was monochromatic, grainy, and appeared to be old, judging by the style of the mirror and chair, the dark stone walls of the room, and the fact that the lighting was flickering, as if the room were lit by candles. Some people said it looked like it was from the 50s, some said it looked older, and others said it was more recent, but was recorded so that it appeared old. Anyway, shortly after the beginning of the video, the old man would begin to speak. The strange thing was that nobody was sure what language he was speaking. The audio was distorted, but occasionally you could hear clearly. Some people thought he was speaking a dialect of English or an archaic form of English because they could make out some words. They also described him as having a croaky voice and an unusual accent. A lot of people who watched that far into it got the impression that he was giving a sermon or a lecture. One student I spoke to said that he felt convinced by the man's words, even though he had no idea what he was talking about, that it was having a hypnotic effect on him. More disturbingly, most who watched it reported hearing laughter in the background. Some described noises like a baby crying. The noises ranged from being faint to sounding as though they were in the same room. At the 13th minute of the video, the man would stop talking, as if he had finished saying what he had to say, and for the first time, his expression would change. He would smile. A broad-lipped, wide-eyed, emotionless smile. Very few people continued to watch beyond this. This moment in the video was reported to be extremely disturbing for some unknown reason. Many of the viewers feared that they would be scarred for life by the image of the old man smiling into the mirror. After a few seconds, the man, still smiling, begins to slowly turn his head to face the camera. That's as much as I know of what follows. Nobody who carried on watching ever went into further detail. When I asked one student why she wouldn't tell me what came after, she got so pale that it was frightening just looking at her. What I do know is that from one student who did watch further, previously a grounded atheist, is that he stopped attending his lectures. They found him a week later, curled up, hiding in a church, shivering with fever and crying that he didn't want to go to hell. The old man in the footage was never identified, nor was the language that he was speaking recognized by any of the professors of language and linguistics at the university. The room with the mirror could have been anywhere in the world. It's still a mystery what happened to the tape in the end. Just as it appeared out of nowhere, it disappeared. After a few months, the hype died down. I haven't spoken to anyone about it since I finished university. Perhaps it's still there right now, hidden somewhere in the archives of a college library, or under a bed in an empty dorm room. Perhaps it's in a landfill site somewhere far away. Or perhaps someone destroyed it a long time ago. I kinda hope for that. I think there was something on that tape that doesn't belong in this world. Something frightening. Something evil. Hey guys, KingSpook here. And I know that my story was extremely short, but you don't even want to know right now. But I'll say this. I would like to thank everybody who participated in this video, and I believe that they're far superior narrators to myself. So I'd like to thank CreepyPastaReads, CreepReads, Kenshin Mizuhara, who has, by the way, excellent speeches. Like, it's impressive. And I watch his videos as frequently as I can. Well, as frequently as he puts them out. I'd like to thank Let's Read. I'd like to thank Natnator77, who uploads a hell of a lot, actually. I'd like to thank Tim Valencia, I've talked to him quite a bit, and I think his videos are pretty good, though I'll be honest, I feel like he needs to upload more, as I definitely watch them, and he's got a really good voice. He was actually on the No Sleep podcast a while ago. I'd like to also thank Unit 522. He's a newer channel, but I mean, he's really good, and he's gaining subscribers quite fast. I feel like, though, a little bit that he's underappreciated. So, I think, well, at least I'm hoping that this video will help get some attention to his channel, along with everyone's channel here. I mean, all of these guys are leagues and bounds above the rest. I think they're fantastic. Okay, continuing on. I would also like to thank Fearagen for his great performance of Actors by one of my favorite authors, Stephen Shorter. And finally, I would like to thank the Creepypasta Wizard. Once again, he delivered an amazing performance, and actually, that's the first time that story's ever been read. So, I mean, it's fresh, original, and I love it. I would also like to thank the authors for even writing these stories. I mean, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and they couldn't have turned out any better, frankly. They're amazing. I would also like to wish a Merry Christmas to everyone who watches. We recently hit 80,000 subscribers, which is amazing. And everything's amazing. Sorry about that. But, yeah, aside from the BS going on here at the moment, I should have a more stable upload schedule in 2016, and hopefully everything will resolve itself. So I'd once again like to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to the narrators, Merry Christmas to the authors, and Merry Christmas to the subscribers and viewers who just stumble upon this video. And I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year.